Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. It's your T-shirted historian, and I am hopefully under-caffeinated. It is quite early, and this is my co-host Grim, who took the wrong meds this morning.
Yes, so I'm a bit sleepy and dopey. So two
So
out of 7 dwarves isn't bad.
yeah. So we're both really tired this morning. So, but we were asked to come in early to do the interview with our guest 2 hours early, and we bent over backwards to help our guest make it whenever they needed to, and they're still not here. So my apologies. What can I say?
I'm guessing time zone miscalculation or something.
Gotta be something. I don't know. Well, if they show up, then of course we'll let them right in. It's not that we're gonna lock them out of the studio, but oh boy. Okay, so I was actually planning on making a separate video about this, but because of how today is going down so far, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about Axe this morning to start off with. And for those of you who don't know what Axe is Adventurer Conqueror King system. Let me
Conan reference.
Yeah, kind of. It's a nice little independent RPG by Autark. It's OSR based, and I got the print-on-demand version from DriveThru RPG, which is pretty nice. Only problem I've had with it in a bound format is the pages and stuff actually seem to be coming loose from the binding. So, but that's not. I'm not blaming that on the writers. I'm blaming that on the binders. So.
Yeah, I think DriveThru uses Lightning Source, which is a UK print company, so I guess I should be supportive, but I used to get some books through them and they were never as good quality as the Lulu ones were. But then Lulu uses different printers in different places around the world, so there's no consistent quality there either. So you just don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, it is what it is. I have good and bad things to say about it. Just to let you know how we did it. We ran it kind of at an accelerated pace. We built characters using their very strict book method. 3-6 in order. Pardon me, it's a little early this morning, and I'm kind of like a Snortopoopas. We did 3-6 in order, and because we really wanted to test out kind of what the system was going to look like mechanically as much as anything else, we went for accelerated level gain. So we did, one level up at the end of every session, and we ran 3 sessions. So plus regular XP from each game session. So by the time the adventure finished up, or I should say our testing finished up, all the characters were 5th level, I believe. Close to 6. Mm-hmm. But that was so that we could, really see what the higher levels look like. Higher levels, well, being what it is. This is using kind of the old school system of, your 18 is your +3 and 9 through 12 is your 0. So it's got more in common with original D&D first edition. Not OD&D. And it does have the prime requisite experience point adjustments. And it does have some unique takes on their classes, which I like. Sorry, Jace. We were supposed to have our guest, but our guest has not arrived. So I don't know what's up with that. Violence solves everything. Hey, good to see you. I've had much better luck with soft covers from drive-through with their hardcovers. I've usually had a pretty good time with their hardcovers, but usually the ones I get are like the premium color ones. I'll be honest, I splurge when I buy my hardcovers from Drive-Thru RPG because it usually is worth it. But just for some reason, this one is kind of coming apart. So I don't know what to say. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things. I'm not gonna get upset about at the publishers for this. This is a Drive-Thru RPG problem or a Lightning Source problem. But anyway, okay, so our core classes, we got fighters, and what I like about the way they do their fighters is, if you'll notice, they get damage bonuses in their experience progression. So your fighter actually is, you know, kind of a butt kicker. They don't ever get too obsolete as far as their ability to deal out damage, and it's the D8 fighters.
That's always the problem with fighters.
You know, yeah, and I've been thinking of that as a regular system implementation anyway. It's just saying that, you know, a fighter gets bonus damage based on their level, you know, like a level 4 fighter would have +4 damage, because eventually it'll seem like they're ramping up a lot of damage, especially if they're getting multiple attacks. But I'm kind of like, yeah, well, I mean, you still got a mage that can throw like, what, 6d6 worth of damage at 5th level. So,
yeah,
you know, where's the comparison? Hey, Ironcaster. Good to see you too. And they use the titles, which I love titles. So that's a bonus for me. And as you can see, the level progression only goes from 1 to 14 in this book. I don't necessarily think that means that you have to stop at 14, but that's just where they stop it. You got your typical mage, which they use the word mage instead of magic user. And you've got your old style saving throw matrices. Or matrices. I don't know if
matrices.
Matrices. Got your cleric. And your thief. And you got your assassin, which is nice. You don't see your assassin very much. Now, a couple of things to note. Well, actually, I'll get into it when we talk about the actual play. But I'm just going through the classes. They have a bard, and this is a level 1 bard. So that is different from first edition D&D. Which, if you remember first edition D&D, in order to play a bard, you had to progress through thief, fighter, and mage to get into the special bard class. So by the time you actually got to start playing a bard, you were like Superman. But they actually have a level 1 bard. Nobody played this, so I can't tell you how the class plays. It looks pretty cool. They have Blade Dancer, which kind of replaces paladins and replaces monks. I thought was kind of a neat idea. Because they get the AC bonus like a monk does for wearing no armor. But they also get spells starting from level 1. And since they're divine spells, they're a little bit like paladins. And they have decent attack ability and such. So I thought that was neat. We didn't use their setting, but their Blade Dancer is kind of like a setting specific class, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether it had more of a specific setting, or whether it was more implied, or what.
Let's see. Violence is, if you are running a game where the mage's spells gain a die every level, then the fighter's weapon should gain a die every level or two. Yeah, see, I agree. I totally agree with that. Because, yeah, the fighter... 3rd edition kind of made up for the fighter's lack of damage by giving them more attacks as they progressed, but it didn't matter because even by the time you were super high level, it's like, yeah, your fighter might have 4 or 5 attacks per round, 6 maybe if they figured out a way to wheedle the system really good, but your mages still had damage that just far outclassed the fighter. It's always been that way.
I mean, extra attacks. I mean, we're finding with 5th edition in the tabletopless game that your main fighter just that's all they do every turn is take a bunch of melee attacks and don't really try to do anything different. At least with spells, it's picking and choosing the right spell for the right situation. But for the fighter, it's always hack, 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 hack. What I did in Machinations of the Space Princess was to make the killer archetype, as in Lamentations, the Flame Princess, the only one where the attack skill went up every level. But anyone can try any combat stunt with a penalty of -5. But if you're a fighter, you're much less penalised for trying different tactics and trips and all that kind of thing. So the aim is to encourage people to try different tactics as a fighter.
Mm-hmm. And good morning, LDG. How are you doing, man? I know you're up usually this early too. You're usually broadcasting this early too, so if you're broadcasting too, then hey, thank you for showing up here. Especially appreciate that. Anyway, moving on through. Let's see. Your next class was your Explorer, which is kind of like your Ranger. Nobody played this either. I mean, it's not because we didn't like that. It's just because we don't, we only have 3 players. We have, like a limited number of play sessions. So it's, we can't really explore every single facet of all the different characters just because it's kind of like, well, unless everybody wants to double down on characters and nobody wants to do that. So I have to kind of go with what my players want to do too. Is I'm trying to get their help on that. But yeah, Explorers also get a damage bonus, as you can see, and they're more specialized for wilderness type stuff. They're kind of like your Ranger, except that they don't actually get a animal companion from the looks of it. Which I guess that's consistent with 1st edition, because your Ranger back in 1st edition didn't get an animal companion either. But they have some neat little bonuses. You got your demi-human classes. This is what I like right here about their demi-human classes. They're not necessarily locked into one progression path. Like for starters, you got your Dwarven Vault Guard, which is kind of like your fighter, getting the damage bonus again. But they also have your Dwarven Craft Priest, which is your spell casting dwarf. It's like a 1st edition casting dwarf? What has the world come to? Hey, Calvinoni. Pretty cool. Then you have your elf spell sword, which is, your typical, elf fighter mage, but they also have, and these don't get the damage progression like a fighter does, but they do get the spell progression. So it pretty much plays like the old basic edition elf. And my dog is barking at something. But you also get these Elven Night Blades, which I think are awesome. And these are elf kind of mage thief types, because they get all the thief abilities, but they also get the mage casting. Although the spell progression is not as good as the spell blade, and it's not as good as a mage, but this is a really good class. I'm gonna say, just because you have a lot of options on how you can approach situations. So I will say that if I were to play this again, I would probably pick up an Elven Nightblade. It has a pretty robust section on equipment, coins, and money, and that sort of thing, and it's using the old school system. It's got a nice little section on standards of living. Good equipment charts. Sorry if I'm kind of quiet. I'm still kind of waking up. This is something I like right here that they did. They did a proficiency thing where your characters, as you can see, they gain proficiencies per level. They have class proficiencies that they're allowed to get into, and they have general proficiencies. And not everybody gets the same amount, and not everybody gets the same ones at every level. Your higher intelligence characters tend to get more proficiencies, so your mage, while on the charts doesn't seem to get as much because of their intelligence, they tend to get a little bit more if they're especially high intelligence mages. We found out that your thief gets the most proficiencies, just straight up.
So the most customizability.
And here's a list of everything, and these proficiencies are pretty cool because they they remind me a lot of the feats from 3rd edition, but they are maybe not quite as overpowered, I guess. I mean, they won't necessarily let you break the game like the 3rd edition ones did. But you can get things like blind fighting or adventuring or contortionism and crafting and different fighting styles, which will give you some bonuses here and there. And, healing, that sort of thing. Some of these are real good. You got your spells. I would have thought your spells would have been old school with the no saves and stuff on some of these things, but in fact, they have saves. Like, let me find it.
Is it the typical kind of thing and memorized spells and...
I believe so. Actually, one of the things I think for spells is they don't have to be you don't have to pre-memorize. Yeah, like it says, unlike other fantasy games and Adventure Conquer King, spellcasters do not have to memorize or prepare spells. They choose which spells to cast at the time of casting from among any and all spells in their repertoire. So that gives you a little bit of flexibility. So, like, if you know,
bookkeeping. And less bookkeeping.
Yeah, I like that better. Dwarven Vault Guards get a good number. Yeah, they do. Manual of Arms to train troops. Keep in mind, we're just using the basic book. So I don't have any additions to this. So we're playing it at basic. And I guess Violence has used this book before. If I recall, your stat bonus is straight up extra spells per day. Yes, that's right. Yeah, +2 from initiative, from intelligence is +2 to all spell levels. Yeah, that's correct. I did not play the spellcaster in our group. Well, actually, I did. I ran a blade dancer because I was curious to see how they held up. I can report they're quite good. They're not as super healy as clerics, but they have a nice balance of being able to fight and being able to heal when needed. But yeah, their spells do get saves, which I was surprised because I thought it would be, your old school sleep spell. You didn't get a save. Well, apparently you do in Axe. So. But that being what it is, it's got a good thing here for all these other tidbits. And what we played, let's see, we played, we had a blade dancer, we had a thief, we had an elven night blade, and we had a mage. So, kind of, sort of the basics. Got cleavings. This is something I like that they do. When you hit 0, you have to roll on the mortal wounds table, and it's modified by how far in negatives you are. And depending on what you roll and your condition, you could end up with permanent wounds, or you could die instantly. But when your character falls now, they aren't necessarily dead. They might get messed up pretty good. like one of your eyes is destroyed, -2 to missile attack throws, or you're blinded, or pretty much anything in this top 2 tables of negatives, you're dead. It's just how badly you were messed up. So generally, you want to stay right over here on this side of the table if you go down. And if you get brought back from the dead, which is possible, you can go over here to the tampering with mortality. Now, I guess it's important to note too that as far as their spells go, let me go back to their spell charts. Come on, thing. Okay. You'll notice at the higher level spells, there are certain spells not on the chart. For one thing, all the spells stop at 6 or 5. So they don't go all the way to 9th level casting. They also don't have Wish as a regular spell. They don't have Raise Dead as a regular spell. But those are castable. They are rituals. And the process for casting rituals is detailed elsewhere. And finding it could be fun. Yeah, here's your ritual spells. And these are what's on the rituals. You have Harvest, Resurrection, Phase Door, Permanency, Wish. And I kind of like that because, you know, if you had Wish as a regularly learned spell, especially in a system where you're allowed unlimited castings as long as you have, you know, abilities to cast, that could get kind of broken. Same with Raise Dead. But at least in this case, you still have a chance to cast these. It's just now they are rituals, and rituals tend to take an entire week to cast, I believe. If I'm correct. Oh, manual arms is a proficiency from the core book. Okay. Yeah, we didn't train any troops, so we didn't actually get into that. But okay, it's not bad. As systems go, it retains a lot of the old first edition D&D flavor, with some nice advancements into kind of like the modern thinking. The proficiencies help it to where not every single class is going to be cookie cutter if you happen to have multiples of the same class, which I like that. We did not, of course, get into the super duper higher levels where you can do things like land management and that sort of stuff, which is also where part of the game is. Oh, no kidding. Kickstarter today for a dwarf book? Dang, Violence, you want to get a spot on the panel, man? You know about a lot about this too, huh? But as much as I liked it and enjoyed it, we had some problems with it. Typically, the biggest problem we had was finding stuff. It was especially difficult for my friend who is running it PDF on the computer. But we had 2 physical copies of the books, and when we needed to look up stuff, it wasn't necessarily where you would think it would be in the book. So there was a lot of page flipping, indexing, and stuff like that, and it slowed game down, especially during character creation, which I don't know. That's kind of not a good thing. There were also some minor problems here and there with text. I'm not talking about misspellings and stuff like that. I don't bitch about misspellings, but like the magic missile spell right here, if it says for every 5 caster levels beyond first, an additional 2 missiles are fired, 3 missiles at 6th, and the maximum of 5 missiles at 13th level. Right there, the math is a little off. So. and it was a little confusing the first time we read it. But that's one of my gripes with the system. It does take tons of XP kind of to move from level to level, kind of like the old school. And I did run an old school adventure with it successfully, though. I will say that. I
Nobody
actually
died?
pulled a.
Nobody
Which one?
died?
No, we actually did have a character who went down a couple of times, but I managed to get them raised using their mortality system. But yeah, nobody died because we played cautious. And I guess that's one of the problems with the system as a whole. Since it does have an old school feel, your thief class and your Nightblade class are going to get a lot of play in the dungeon more than anybody else, because it's kind of the old thing of, if you go into a dungeon, your thief is out front or your Nightblade is out front, and they're constantly checking for traps and checking for secret doors, listening at the doors, and trying to get everyone prepared for the encounter. And that's kind of like typical old school play, if you're being cautious and stuff like that. I mean, whereas, they're more modern, like, let's say 5th edition, fighter can run up and boot the door, and even if they blunder into an ambush, generally they can survive it. This is old school, and you might not survive it. So you had to play kind of cautious back in the old school. But I ran the old Lost City basic dungeon module, just to be fair, because I didn't want to do a one of my usual off-the-cuff adventures, because I thought, no, that might play too much into like favoritism or something. So I thought, okay, if we use a standard module to run it, then we'll see how it plays against standard opponents with standard treasure and all this by the book. And it was fun to revisit the old dungeon. But yeah, my main problem is it is harder to find things in the book when you need them, especially if you need them quickly. Now, maybe there's a DM screen that makes it faster, or maybe there is I think this is the newest printing, which it says it's a 1st edition printing, so I'm guessing they haven't made any changes to it since then.
Might be errata in the other books. Perhaps.
Yeah, there might be errata in the other books, so I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. But as it is, yeah, if you're looking for stuff, you're gonna have to take a little bit of time. And typically, if we ran 3 to 4 hour sessions at a time, so. But it does have everything.
What sets it apart from being just another old school clone then?
From what I gather of the setting, it is a little bit more. It feels a little bit more Howard-esque, given that the super high-powered magics are rituals. And the proficiencies are really nice, and they add that extra touch of customizability to your characters, so they're not all cookie cutter. I like that. I suppose at the end of the day, you could really just kind of call it a either a clone or a heartbreaker, or somebody's homebrew of 1st edition D&D. The fact that this integrates pretty seamlessly with older edition modules, is kind of nice, because you can just pick it straight up and grab an old module and run this, and it dovetails into it nicely. Their treasures are really cool, by the way. I will say that. I like their treasure tables a lot. But yeah, it is. It's pretty much it's you know, kind of a retro clone, but it's a good one, and I do like it. But I kind of feel like it is not a. I feel like it's not really like, okay, if you're a brand new DM, or if you're brand new to TTRPGs and you want to go pick up a system, this is probably not the game system for you, because a lot of the way this book is written feels a lot like it was made for veteran players who were at least familiar with first edition D&D. I mean, maybe I'm being overly harsh about it. I don't know. I don't think I am. It doesn't really feel noob friendly. But overall, I like it. My players kind of don't like to do old school edition anymore so much, so we will probably not play this again with the same group. I might be able to introduce other players to it and get them trained on it and playing it. But it's not something I think we're going to see a lot of play at our table. But that's not me saying anything bad about the system itself. It's just for our group, it's not our thing, I think. Orc from Mork, hey, good to meet you, or good to see you again. This is Axe, Adventurer, Conqueror, King system. And good morning, Matt. It's good to see you. So yeah, overall, you know, I guess I'd give it I guess of 7 out of 10 overall.
Seems
Maybe
very
an 8
complete.
out of 10. Pardon?
It seems very complete.
It is. It is. That's the nice thing. You can buy the one book and it's got everything in it. There is quite a lot of supplemental material, and I was kind of curious about picking some of that up to see how it modifies things. But given that the players at my table are probably not going to want to play it any further, I don't know that I could justify the cost other than personal interest. And yes, by the way, they do have slavery and slave tables. So, so yeah, kind of like, well, you know, you take it as you want. It does have a really good recommended reading section, and you can clearly see where a lot of the inspiration came from on some of this. Although Michael Chabon, really? Nah.
Do you start with more than one hit point?
Yes, you do start with more than one hit point. But it is a rolled hit point system. Just to be kind of like nice to everybody, instead of rolling hit dice, I said, okay, look, everybody can take max hit points at first level. Just to make the survivability a little better. But then after that, it was all rolled hit points.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit on the forgiving side, because the very first thing we did the very first night is I said, okay, look, we got to test out the combat system right off the bat. And that's what we did. And sure enough, you know, like 2 members of the party went down in that combat against just regular old orcs.
Yep.
So it's one of those systems where you're probably going to want to have an extra character ready in case you have bad luck on the mortal wounds table, which can happen because the characters don't go into negative hit points, or if they do go into negatives, it affects their mortality depending on how far into negatives they went.
But that does mean you don't necessarily die outright from being taken out.
Right. And that is one thing I do like about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Overall, I think I could recommend it, but I don't recommend it as anybody's first TTRPG. Get your feet wet with something else that's a little bit more accessible or user friendly, I guess. And then give yourself a try at this. And preferably, I guess you'd really want to start with like first edition D&D, or at least basic, to get a feel for this. That's just my opinion. You know, you take it as you leave it. I did, like I said, I didn't dislike it. I thought it was pretty neat overall. It's just I don't think my players are going to want to play it any further than the 3 sessions that we played it. I might have to find a different group and try it at a higher level and maybe revisit my my thoughts on it. But I think it kind of is what it is. I don't know, you got any questions for me about it, Grim?
I think I already asked them. Though I was just thinking, you look at the fiction from which a lot of these games are derived, things like Conan and so on, and the timeline jumps around a lot in different stages in his career in the various stories, which is something you don't see replicated in RPGs very much. Probably because, you know, if you know you're going to survive to become something later, there's no jeopardy if you're playing your character earlier in their career. Just I don't know. For some reason that came to mind.
Yeah, that's an idea. And I think for future play tests and stuff like that, I'm going to accelerate the levels, the level gains, to, you know, to be able to see kind of like what characters are capable of at higher and higher levels. I mean, starting at first, and then maybe next session would be, I don't know, 3rd or 6th, and then the next one would be 9th or 12th or something, just to kind of get a good feeling of the cross section of how powerful characters really can get. But
in all these D&D derived games, it tends to be, you know, level 1 to 6 that's the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. The game has been around for a while now, and the creator, as well as talk about this game, is banned from Big Purple, so it has that going for it.
Yeah.
What is Big Purple?
Big Purple RPG Net.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, but all the best people are banned from RPG Net.
Yeah. Well, I got nothing against the creator. I think, you know, like I said, it's a good system. It feels very much like his homebrew first edition D&D rule set, but it is not a bad homebrew.
Yeah.
For what it is, you know, and it's very, very compatible with older material.
Macris is a good dude, despite being a serial entrepreneur and libertarian. So he ran the Escapist, didn't he, back in the day?
Or OSE might be a good entry level system to get someone into 1E style games. Basic rules are free and books are decently priced. Yeah. I like OSE. In fact, I hit their Kickstarter because it was the only way I could get a complete set of the books. Because every time I have tried to get up on Exalted Funeral to buy an OSE book, they are sold out, or when they get restocks, I don't have money. So I splurged and got their Kickstarter set. So I have a full set of the books coming to me. I have all the PDFs right now. So. And at some point, we will probably review OSE, although I don't really know that there is a lot of reason to, because, you know, it's kind of like, well, it's the old school rules. So
presentation, layout.
Yeah. There's that
Readability.
I think if we do run it, we're going to use a lot of the companion pieces and stuff like that to really showcase what the companion rules can do, because there's a lot of systems out there that are basically, you know, just recopies of the first edition rules, you know, basically as they are. I think what tends to set a lot of those systems apart is the companion stuff that you add on to it. You know, how can you expand races? How can you expand more classes and make it more, give it more character that is its own, separate from old school D&D. Which I guess is a point in the favor of Axe, is the fact that right off the bat, you have classes that are flavored specifically for their game that are not like old D&D. So I would almost say it's kind of superior to first edition D&D just because it takes it that extra step that helps personalize it a little bit more from first edition D&D. But I hope they will go through that book and maybe revise it just a little bit, clean up some of the little errors, and kind of make things a little bit more accessible. Because it's, the presentation is pretty, flat. It's like take it as you will. I'm not necessarily meaning, dress it up with better artwork and all that fancy hoojamagidge that makes the WotC books so expensive, but just, make some of the stuff more accessible where it's kind of like, you give examples and things like that more often.
What's interesting to me about the old school is, so back in the day, sort of pre-internet, every game of D&D was different. Everyone's table was different. Everyone had their own rules tweaks, their own stuff they'd made up and added in, and they presented the game in a different way. And with everyone and their dog publishing their own set of old school rules, you basically get to do the equivalent of playing at a whole bunch of different tables with different people's interpretations and ideas and presentations. Sometimes things are stretching the rules, beyond where it was, or stripping them back. Something like Mork Borg is sort of really stripped down. And other times it's how it's presented. So Lamentations of the Flame Princess is very much more about how it's presented and how the way in which they're encouraging you to play, rather than the rules necessarily. Though there's a couple of tweaks. It's it's especially interesting for me because I was never a big D&D nerd until third edition, when a lot of work was available for third edition. So
yeah, and that's something I lament with my group. The fact that we're all approaching 50 or 60 or 70 in the case of one of the oldest gamers at our table. We had, growing up, we had a lot more people who played D&D around our area. So one of the things that I think has been lost on modern D&D that is something from old D&D was the fact that you could play a couple of sessions in somebody's game with a character, and if somebody else was running a game later in the week, usually you could take that same character to their campaign and experience a totally different set of rules or ideas, just based on whatever tweaks they made to the game, but also what supplements they used. I mean, if you, let's say you got something, like rules for a certain race or something out of the Dragon magazine back then that was allowed at one table, it wasn't necessarily allowed at another table, so you might be forced to roll up a whole new character in order to play.
We'll just not use that particular thing. But that was also made possible by the fact that level progression was so slow, something you were saying about Axe earlier. So, you could go and play a session of someone else's game and get the XP, and it wouldn't immediately out-level you from the rest of the party. Yes. And you're in whatever other game you were playing. So,
yeah, and I think that's an element that's been lost just due to time. And I mean, maybe there's, there's game groups where, multiple people run the game and allow their characters to be used in different games. But my experience with most of the 5th edition crowd is it usually tends to be the same GM all the time using or running that specific set of characters all the time. Rather than, the multiple world scenario, as it were.
Yeah, but then scenarios also used to be more contained as well, didn't they? You wouldn't play a campaign necessarily, save as a string of adventures, and the only thing connecting them would be the characters. But you would go on an adventure, not planning for a years-long campaign or whatever. I always defaulted to longer campaigns because that's just the style I prefer to run games in. But the idea of going on an adventure, just the one, that's been lost as well.
I considering that I play with the same group all the time now, and have been for a long time, we do more long-term campaign playing, and that's just because of mostly lack of options. Only a couple of us run, and we run separate characters and stuff like that. But I do miss the old being able to make a character in one person's game and then run it in someone else's game and get the experience of having stuff across different games. I don't know, saying the word game a lot, but
It could be interesting to make the same character and put them through level ups through all the levels. So, okay, we're running this module, it's level 3 to 6, so you can play one of your characters from level 3 to 6, and then you have a level 3, 4, 5, 6 version of that character, that you can then play.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea too. I don't know. I mean, I think what you do to enjoy your game is the best. Just the whole thing of role play, sitting down to be able to role play and throw dice and bullshit with your friends is, that's really the best part of it anyway, in my opinion. I mean, a lot of people place emphasis on, getting the treasures or, getting the experience points and getting the levels or whatever, It's just kind of like, for me, it's kind of like, just being able to sit down and hang out with friends and just kind of immerse yourself in a different world for a little while. Get away from this world. And our guest has arrived. So yes, Cal,
Right.
he has arrived. And hey, Squeak a Mouse, house rules, yeah. And Calstas says we replicate that feeling by having multiple DMs in our group. Well, we have multiple DMs in our group too, but unfortunately, since we all kind of play different styles and different campaigns with different sets of rules, we don't cross-platform per se. But good morning, Taylor. Hello.
We no hear you.
I'm guessing he'll be on in a second. I don't know, maybe we didn't pull him in immediately and all right. Well, like I said, I hadn't intended to talk about Axe this morning so much. I was gonna do just a whole separate video on it, but oh, and now he's disconnected. Let me check on Twitter and see what's going on real quick.
Okay. Hopefully Taylor will be able to be on in a minute.
Yep, I hope so. Oh, Snorty, you gotta go? I'm sorry, bub. Group illusion. Oh, there he is. There he is again. Hey, Taylor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think we had a bit of a miscommunication over times. We changed the time for the last minute. Really sorry about that. I understand if the streams are already almost over or something. That sucks.
No, we managed. We managed. No, it's I couldn't get a reply from Grim until early this morning because obviously he was sleeping. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sorry about that. I should have checked my phone.
it's okay. It's all right. Hey, man, you're here.
Yeah. How much time do we have left?
Well, I don't have anything going on today. Do you, Grim?
No, not really.
Okay.
Okay, great.
You're our guest.
All right.
It's all right.
So-
I managed to get my review of Adventurer Conqueror King out. Impromptu. Yeah. So that it worked out.
Yeah.
And
To be honest, I have. I was just gonna say I have pretty mixed feelings about Adventurer Conqueror King.
Oh well, hang on a sec. We'll get your thoughts on it. By the way, everybody out there in the audience, the next game system that my group is going to be testing, and I'm very excited for it, is Amazing Adventures from Troll Lord Games, and I suspect that one is going to be a big hit with my group. I'm very excited about it. I'm running our first session today. We're actually building our first characters today, and gonna try and get a little bit of a session playtime in today, and we will play 3 sessions of it. I'm gonna discuss with them whether or not they want to do really accelerated level gains just to see how the system progresses. But I'm really confident that one's gonna be a hit at our table. But yeah, go ahead, Taylor. Tell us your feelings on Axe. I'm curious.
So, how do I put this? Axe at core is mostly just old school D&D. It's old school D&D with a number of house rolls in, and that's fine. That's whatever. That's not really what I'm gonna give thoughts on. What really bothers me is the domain management.
See, we didn't get high enough level into that to try it, so I'm curious to see what you say.
I mean, there's a whole other sidebar about that, but if you read the domain chapter, what it says is that its basic theory of how you set up a domain is you go and claim something. You either go and claim something unoccupied, which it seems to think there's going to be a lot of in the game, or you go and you pledge fealty to an existing ruler and you get some land from them.
Well,
but it's mostly assuming that you're going to get something unoccupied. It just sort of gives the possibility as sort of the whole thing struck me as sort of like rules that they give you because they know you're going to try it and they want to explain why it's a dumb idea.
I don't know. It almost kind of makes sense to me. It's like if you, let's say if you were playing like the Village of Hamlet, and you do manage to clear out the the moat yard and all that stuff like that. I mean, there's nothing stopping adventurers from claiming all that.
Oh no. I don't. That's not the part that I have an issue with. I'm just sort of explaining the whole thing so that I can sort of have given it a fair explanation before I critique it.
Okay.
And then it assumes that it basically assumes you'll go and you'll clear out something, you'll make it safe for people to move to, and then people will move arbitrarily far distances to go and be your villagers. But it assumes that you're going to tax them at really high rates. I think I did the math once, and it's like a 20% rate, which is really high.
That's
historically.
Way high.
And it also doesn't make any sense because feudal serfs and colonial settlers are diametrically opposed models of land use. Like it was really like colonial settlement of the New World that really helped to break feudalism in the Old World, because the idea behind being a feudal serf is there's nowhere else for you to go. So you're going to be willing to put up with a lot of bullshit from your feudal lord and fairly high tax rates. Your feudal lord is basically the law over you. And you're going to put up with that because there's just not a lot of land. But if you're going and you're moving to a new place, the general historical model for that is you're going because you're being promised new freedoms and low or no taxes. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like I read through the rules and it's just like this is a confused mishmash of uh like the settlement of the Old West and like daily feudal life, which is, you know, that's a lot of what D&D is at its roots. At its roots, D&D is very influenced by the Western genre, which I think has been really neglected as a factor in modern D&D.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Yeah.
Well,
It
speaking
seems to me like they're aiming for something in between. I mean,
Yeah.
what really put pay to the feudal system wasn't so much colonial settlement as the Black Death.
Sure.
You know, that killed an awful lot of people, and by necessity, that broke the back of serfdom between various rebellions, and just there not being enough people to work the land in a lot of places. But then, so the other aspect to that, the kind of more colonial settlement in your standard fantasy world, you know, the cities and the lands immediately around them, those are settled and safe, but everywhere else is here be monsters. So the moving in of a feudal lord in the form of an adventurer to take over an area of that and render it safe via their protection, that does make sense as having more land to open up.
I guess, and to be clear, yeah, obviously, I don't mean to overstate the impact of the New World on feudalism. Obviously, nothing's mono-casual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that's an explanation of it. It still bothers me a little bit. Simply from a game mechanics perspective and ignoring all the history, it bothers me that there's just not a lot that you can really do to really affect how well your settlement does or doesn't do in the game. Like it's such minimal domain management rules that it just sort of makes domain management seem boring. Which,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's its big selling point. You get to be the king.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's, to me at least, it feels weird that it doesn't even try to start you out at it. Like as T-shirt historian said, he never got to high enough level to actually do the point of adventurer, conqueror, king. That's weird, right?
No, I guess that's true, and that's probably why in the future we're gonna like accelerate levels a little bit to see kind of what we could do at a higher level.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, you know, I mean, let's be honest, most games these days they never get to high level. Even back in the old days, they never got to high level because it's just the grind is very excruciating without some kind of a faster XP go up, which is kind of funny because my players actually don't want fast go ups because we had fairly fast go up while we were playing Pathfinder and 3rd edition, and their complaint was, well, you're leveling up so fast you don't really get to experience and understand the level that you're at. So they literally built a progression system that slowed it down even more. I'm serious. I'm not even joking. So my players don't actually want fast progression if they can, which is kind of unusual, I guess, because they're old school players. But kind of to address it from a different angle, from a historical angle, I guess. You know, back in England, you had you know the monks who, you know, would kind of go off on their own and pray and all that stuff, and then people would offer them money for prayers because, you know, back then you could pay somebody to pray on your behalf because prayer was considered to be, you know, such an important part of life. Well, these monks got super duper rich because people just kept paying them, and they would like live off in little hovels away from everybody else. Well, eventually they decided, well, we kind of want a little bit more than hovels to live in. So they started using that money to hire people to come out there and build them, you know, those magnificent monasteries and stuff that we have now. Well, as a consequence of that, of course, if you're going to employ a workforce, you're going to need to feed them, you're going to need to house them, clothe them, and all these other supplementary things grew up around them, and of course the monks got a piece of all of that action because they're all on their territory. And that's kind of like how some of these modern English towns, they still exist because of this, because the monks building their monasteries and all the construction projects that surrounded it grew those places.
And then along came Henry VIII.
Yeah, and then along came Henry VIII. But that's kind of how whenever I run higher level domain play, I like to run it kind of the same way. If the territory is not granted straight out by a ruler, then the chances are it's kind of like, okay, well, the players have a ton of money and they want to, maybe buy some place that's way off, away from everybody else, and start their own construction projects. And naturally, towns and stuff are going to develop around that. So it kind of happens organically, which is probably how I would handle it for Axe, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad way to do it, but then just from a gameplay perspective, I'd want that to be supported by some sort of table or something you could roll on that would give you events that are like problems or opportunities you can engage with. Like, I
think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I actually, I've written this game that's sort of domain play from level 1. I haven't released it yet because it's really like a full-on campaign level thing that really needs playtesting to a large degree before I can like really feel comfortable charging people money for it. But it's called Beneath an Endless Sky, and basically the conceit of it is that you're the leaders of nomadic tribes in a tribal confederation.
Mm-hmm.
Because historically, that was how nomadic groups tended to work. Is like they wouldn't just be one tribe together; they'd be a bunch of tribes together. And sort of the way I addressed that in that context was I have a deck of playing cards, and the GM draws from the deck of playing cards whenever time passes. It's about a week on average, but it doesn't actually require you to have strict time records. And then the cards give prompts that the DM can run. Like, I don't know, people of different tribes have found a magic weapon. They all have claim on it. They're going to involve the PCs. So the PCs have a reason to try and fight or wheel and deal with each other. Or, I don't know, some similar things like that. It's just an example, and it's very... I think you need to modify the system a lot to have it work in a settled way.
Yeah, and, we do something similar at our table already. We have been doing it for years, for 30 years, since I've been playing with them.
Wow.
But we use a deck of tarot cards, and most of us are pretty well versed in how to read them. And we, whenever we want random events or we have questions we have to ask about how an NPC might act or how something might be going down or complications, etc., we'll draw from the deck, or we'll ask the person asking about it to draw from the deck, and then we'll take a look at the card or cards and interpret that and come up with with what the deal is on it. Your system actually sounds a little bit easier, just because, if you are using a mechanical table, that's probably going to suit people a lot better than having to sit down and learn how to read tarot cards.
Yeah. It's meant as a thing where you can basically use the table without really thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just as a GM, I don't like doing prep.
No, me either.
I love running the game. I don't like doing prep. So I'm always trying to design little things that like sort of take the prep away from you. And obviously how much you can do that is context dependent on what sort of game it is. But that's an example of that sort of mechanic.
Yeah, I think you and I are probably a little bit closer on that page. I think Grim
Yeah.
actually has to involve a lot of prep. I'm not sure.
Well, for tabletopless, yeah, we're playing D&D, which does involve a lot of prep. On domain level play, Pendragon always handled that really well. I
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
especially with
Yeah.
the supplement focused onto that. I've written a couple of similar games where it all operates at the kind of domain level. Colony Moon, where you're running a moon colony and trying to make it so it's self-sustaining and operable, and there's tables in that. You know, these problems come up, and then you're each like different members of the lunar board, and you come up with different plans on how to try and tackle it and trade political influence to try and enact one of those plans. So that's one game I've done like that. Ace of Hearts is similar. You all play prostitutes and staff in an Old West brothel, trying to deal with drunk cowboys and other events, and to come out on top so you can get the deed to the place, inherit it from the madam who's dying.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
That's Ace of Hearts. And some of the ideas behind both of those I took from the old superhero RPG called Underground, which had great rules for influencing the neighborhood in which you're living. So you're playing these sort of down and out war veteran, sort of homeless superheroes who were engineered for a South American war.
Yeah.
But whatever neighborhood you're in, it has these statistics, and then the missions that you go on, the things that you do, can improve the situation, which will probably improve another one, but it might make something else worse. So if you deal with the corrupt police force, right, that might reduce corruption, reduce authoritarianism or whatever. I can't remember the exact stats, but it might increase crime because the police are no longer as present or as motivated. So then that then gives you your cues for your next sessions. You know, okay, what problem are we going to deal with now? This has gotten worse. Yeah, how can we improve things? So
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Not least to which because that sounds like it really zooms in on just one neighborhood. I feel like sometimes plots in RPGs can get too big. Like I don't find a lot of pleasure in the PCs have to save the world. I don't know, the PCs want to find a way to get their dad to love them, or the PCs want a lot of money and don't want to do any work for it.
Maybe it's just a modern thing.
Yeah.
I think you do get fatigued from save the world plots, but
Hey,
a lot of media centers around that. You know, Lord of the Rings, the epic quest to save the world, superhero movies tend to build up to that point of save the world or save the universe or whatever. Yeah, there's a loss of the small victories. I mean, me and T-Shirt were talking earlier about how the art of the sort of singular enclosed game session or adventure seems to have been lost. Everything seems to be about campaign play.
Yes.
Rather than, we're going to go here, clear out these monsters, and recover the treasure for the villages, and that's it. That's the whole thing. It's not part of some bigger arc.
Yeah, the more one-off play. That is kind of a lost thing, I think. And we got a question here. Ironcaster says, quick, what's everyone's favorite class and or race? What system, Ironcaster?
I mean, what am I supposed to say here? Like, bourgeoisie Hispanic?
Favorite class and race, huh? Well, race is easy for me. I like Minotaurs. I really do. They're not playable in most games, but the ones that they are, I always have a really fun time. Just because, I play them like brutes. And fun brutes, though.
Assuming he means sort of D&D and D&D alikes, I'd say human rogue, because I like adaptability and scope in my characters.
Yeah. Class-wise, that's always hard to pick. Pathfinder, I really, really love the Oracle class. It is my absolute favorite class because I feel like I can do more with it. I'm important to the party, and I could just do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Most games, I kind of like your fighting types who have a little bit of magic that they can have more options with other than just fight. I don't know. How about you,
it
Taylor?
depends. It depends a lot on the system and the setting for me. I tend to not be a player, at least partially because I just like GMing more, and partially because I'm a little bit of an annoying player. Like, my favorite class is usually Bard, and my favorite race is whichever one is the weirdest. Or I'll play some sort of class race combination that ends up being an elaborate pun that I only reveal at like the second or third session when it's too late for anyone to stop me.
I do like races class, generally speaking, but there's something to be said for, class and race being separated too.
Yeah.
It helps avoid cookie cutterism. Oh, and Ironcaster says dwarf fighter is a correct answer. Dwarf cleric is also acceptable. No.
Eh.
And besides, first edition, you couldn't be a dwarf cleric. You had to be a dwarf fighter because that's all there was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one approach to it. I don't know. At least in more like modern editions of D&D, it's really funny how you can just stack charisma upon charisma, and because no one ever really thinks to stop you, because the game ends up being so focused on combat rules that, like, yes, you can get plus 20 to your intimidation at third level. You're not actually that scary of a guy, but you have plus 20 intimidation. I don't know. It's entertaining when you're like 15, but I don't. It's been a while since I played one character like that. God, about 10 years. Wow.
I find that one of the problems that you tend to have with all the game systems, no matter what it is an overtly strong sense of niche. And I'll give you an example. It's like, okay, the last 5th edition game I played a cleric. Well, my cleric kind of really didn't get to do much as far as role playing goes. Pretty much, the bard in the group did all the talking, did all the wheeling and dealing. Every time we got to town encounters, the GM seemed to pay a lot more attention to the bard. And, as a result, it's kind of like my cleric was just kind of like sitting in the back, twiddling thumbs, waiting for something to come his way. Every once in a while, I'd try to speak up and get some role play going, but largely it went ignored. It was pretty much the bard show every time we were in town. So, as a consequence, I really dreaded town encounters. But of course, when we got into the dungeons, then everybody's kind of like, "Oh my god, I'm dying, cleric, heal me." Okay.
See, I've noticed that sort of thing as a trend in design, where designers. So, there's a concept I call spotlight, which is, I think, what you're talking about. Like, in town, the bard always had spotlight. When people wanted you to heal them, you had spotlight. And people and what really matters at the table isn't balance between character builds, it's spotlight. It's, do I get to do something, right?
Right.
And for whatever reason, it seems to be a trend in design to think that it's acceptable to have people go an hour without doing anything, as long as there's a time when, like, they can monopolize the spotlight in their turn. But, like, obviously the ideal thing is everyone has a little bit of the spotlight at all times, roughly speaking, rather than we're going to have the bard hour and then the cleric hour and then the rogue hour.
Yeah.
Well, the cleric doesn't even really get an hour because during combat, you're busy sharing the spotlight with everybody else because everybody's doing stuff in
Well, that's
combat.
it's a consequence of niche protection, which I think goes back to classes in D&D, which in turn goes back to like troop types in war games from which D&D was derived. So yeah, each thing's been assigned its role, and you kind of have to assume as a games master that the players around the table are playing something that they want to play. So yeah, if you're playing a cleric, you're going to assume that you're going to want to get involved in the religion of the setting, encounter gods and angels and whatever, and that you're there to heal. But quite often you'll find players choose to play that because that's what the group needs, and it's not necessarily what they're really fired up to play. So there can be a mismatched level of expectation.
And that might have been the case for me. I remember when I showed up to the table with my cleric, and the first thing I asked the GM was, I said, well, I made a cleric with a healing domain because, apparently y'all were short a cleric and a healer, so I figured I could fill that niche, but I don't know anything about your gods in your setting. And he was like, oh, okay. And that was pretty much all I ever heard about the gods and the setting. It never, ever came up again. In fact, I mentioned it twice to the GM on 2 different occasions and never got an answer. So I just kind of made up my own fictional god and went on. And, it wasn't until I was literally 1 session away from bailing on the game because I was so bored with it that anybody even showed the slightest interest in who my god was or anything. And at that point, I was pretty much checked out. So,
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. So it's funny you mentioned this. So I like clerics as a concept. I've never seen a really good cleric, so I wrote one. I forget whether I published this or not.
I'm looking.
It would be called the Mystic if I did.
Mystic
Yeah,
OSR
I did.
class.
Yeah, I did. I published it. And its basic thing is, obviously, since you're a cleric, you have faith dice. It's a thing. It's how you power your character, and you get faith dice by making sacrifices. It's either gold or it's a being. So there's the nice way to do it, and there's the evil way to do it. And you can heal people because you're a cleric. That's what everyone expects a cleric to be. And then at 2nd level and each even level after, you just get to say, this is a thing that I think is sacred. And then you get to have power over that thing, but you aren't allowed to act contrary to its aims. And I put that at 2nd level because I find that oftentimes there's this weird game design trend to make players sort of guess what the campaign is going to be about. Like in 3rd edition, there's the Ranger's favorite enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that you have to sort of guess: are there going to be a lot of oozes in this game? Is there going to be a lot of drow in this game? Will there be undead? And if you guess right, cool, you get a bunch of bonuses against that. And if you guess wrong, the GM isn't actually obligated to put that in. It's a passive ability. It's an ability that demands GM prep rather than giving you as a player a thing to go for.
We found the same problem with languages too.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh, well, my character speaks, Orcish and Goblinish and all this. Well, you never encounter a single green race in the entire game after that. And it's kind of like, well, don't I feel useful?
Yeah, I mean, this is why in sort of my home rule set of Dice Dream, I sort of just said, I took inspiration from some blog or other, I think it was called Goodberry, that common is called common because everything speaks it. Yes, everything. That wolf speaks common. That dragon speaks common. That lich who's been in this crypt for 9,000 years speaks common. Because what does it add to the game to have someone whose language you don't understand?
That is a fair point. It
For
does serve
puzzles,
to.
it can be useful for deciphering things. That's
Yeah, that is the thing that I sort of had to sacrifice for it.
Yeah, there's that. I find it annoying when only one character speaks the language of whatever it is you're communicating with, because then it's kind of like you're trying to rely on them as a translator, depending on whether or not the player is playing a character who's a dick.
Yeah.
He said you need to. He said you need to pay me all this much money. No, really, he said that.
the reason I find clerics boring is because well, it's the same reason I find, even though I'm not religious, I find religion and spirituality fascinating in real life, because nobody actually knows and they're all operating on faith. There is no evidence for the existence of any god, so everyone's operating on this weird level of trust. But in most fantasy games, as in Terry Pratchett, you know the gods are real, because if you say they're not, they're going to come around your house and put a brick through your window. Right? They're undeniably real. So there's no tension there. There's not necessarily any interpretation of signs, or I might be wrong, or what about having a religion. It's, I worship this god, I make these donations, I get these spells. It's all very matter of fact. You're just like a middle manager for God Inc. So the way I've been trying to deal with that is by making my gods in my games a bit more capricious, a bit more like the Roman and Greek gods. They're massively egotistical powers that be that will fuck with you.
I like stuff like that. And something that you and I talked about on our very, very first episode is how cleric and mage magic is kind of the same, because it's using the same system and it's very samey. So what's the real difference between arcane and divine magic? Just like everybody else, I'm kind of working on my own little heartbreaker / homebrew rule set, and I'm going to actually have a separate stat for clerics to have, which is going to be called faith. And rather than use the memorized spell list thing, what I plan to do is create basically like a faith point system, and use that as a leaving clerics to have open spell book, because to me it seems like, since clerics overall don't have the firepower that a mage has, they're very limited in their skill set. I mean, yes, they can still pick up a weapon and wear heavy armor and go kick ass, but it's still not quite the same as being able to chuck a fireball and destroy an entire room full of people, or sleep an entire group of monsters and shut an entire counter down with that. So I want clerics to be able to have open spell book, to where they can cast any spell in the book, provided they have sufficient faith to cast it. So if it does become that 11th hour thing where the party's getting TPK'd and the cleric is the last one standing, he can still maybe manage that mass resurrection, or that raised dead, or whatever he needs to get that critical party member back up and into the fight, even at a low level. Because that, to me, that seems more like what what clerics really do. They don't cast magic. They're supposed to be doing miracles, the miraculous. It's divinely inspired, divinely given. It should feel more miraculous than just, saying, okay, well, I'm taking bless spell 4 times a day, and,
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I mean, that's part of the idea I had with the Mystic. Is like you don't it to make it feel miraculous. I had it instead of the Mystic getting spells per se, they get when you make a check related to interacting with a sacred thing, you can add as many faith dice as you wish to your roll or attribute, as long as you are not attempting to oppose that sacred thing's aims. Like you're not necessarily if you I don't know, you're a cleric of the water god. You're not necessarily gonna like I don't know make I don't know throw water at someone or something, but you might I don't know be able to hold your breath for half an hour if you can make the check, or I don't know swim up a waterfall, or if you're a cleric of the fire god, you might be able to coat yourself in fire, roll high enough to survive, and I don't know, go over and hug the big bad evil guy or something.
Or maybe go hug the bad guy and then cast Flame Strike on yourself.
Yeah. yeah.
Hey, Kringe, good to see you this morning.
Oh, Kringe.
Good morning, guys.
Harrow.
Yeah, we're talking a little bit about niche protection here.
Niche as in how?
Well, it's like, okay, one of my conceits was this kind of like it seems like a lot in the modern game, whatever niche your character is seems to be their only role, to the point where they're a lot of times excluded.
Specialists as opposed to generalists.
Yeah, but like over specialized. Like my particular example is I ran a cleric in the last 5th edition game I played, and got almost no roleplay time whatsoever because the bard dominated the roleplay the entire time because they have the highest charisma.
A bard thing.
It shouldn't be just a bard thing.
Oh no, I'm not saying it should be. I'm just saying that's. I guess culturally in role-playing games, that's their job.
It is, but I mean, it's like the fighter should still get to do role play too, other than just I go buy new sword, I wear new armor. Okay, I done.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite character I've ever role played was a paladin. I mean, yeah, they tend to have a higher charisma, but it was still the most fun I've had as role playing because she wasn't that type of paladin.
And Kit, yeah, you hitting on it exactly. The medieval saints' lives, yeah, they always come with the right miracle for the right circumstances. Open cell doors check, see through demonic illusions check. Yeah, and that's kind of more or less what I want to simulate using faith points.
Okay, they don't come up with the miracles.
Well, their God does, but the deal is,
as a Catholic, I have to point that part out.
I used to be a Catholic too. That's like one of the things that I was talking about. Yeah, Grim and I, we were even talking about on our very first episode was that, mechanically the magic for divine magic and arcane magic isn't all that different in all of the systems.
No, and they're exactly the same. It's just chocolate versus vanilla, basically.
Right.
I hate that monk is the martial arts class. Because to me, monks should be, in these kind of fantasy settings, should be the guys, cloistered away, whipping themselves so they don't masturbate. Those kinds of people, not.
Well, they're Shaolin monks.
Yeah, I know, but most fantasy settings, by default, are pseudo-medieval Western European.
And there's no reason for a Shaolin monk to be there.
Yeah,
the paladin is the warrior monk.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying, but like they're inexplicably lifted from Wuxia movies.
Yeah,
sure, ban the Kung Fu monk. I have no objection. It's just that's what they are.
Well, I liked the way Pathfinder First Edition did the brawler.
Yes, the brawler was a great class
because it was unarmed fighter, but it wasn't it wasn't martial arts flavored. And
that's what I did for. That's what I did for Grimdark. It's just
a
bare knuckle boxer instead of
pugilist.
Yeah.
I actually prefer that. I do. Okay, I admit. Okay, I'm a martial artist. I do like being able to flavor my game with a kung fu dude. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I can understand where that might not be setting appropriate, or it would be so far outside the scope of where your game takes place. Like, certainly, you can't call anybody in Lord of the Rings a monk. I mean, Aragorn might punch an orc in the face, but that doesn't make him, like Shaolin, god or anything.
So,
you know what I'm saying?
Most of what monks are doing that's actually of any Okay, so the fun part of playing a monk, before we totally just throw monks out the window, which why not? The fun part of playing a monk is really just that you get to do cool maneuvers,
Yes.
which in my opinion, and the opinion of I don't know whoever it is that wrote Dungeon Crawl Classics, should just be integrated into the fighter.
It should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the monk should just be a flavor of fighter. Golem channeled his key.
Yes, he did.
Like I mean,
I'd make Gollum a monk.
Maybe he knows how to survive.
If I had to stat out the characters, depending on the system, I would use monk for Gollum most likely.
Well, I mean, he did fight with his fist. He did, catch fish out of the river with his bare hands. Yeah, kind of monk, sort of.
I mean, I wouldn't want to stat out those characters for D&D because they don't work.
No, they don't.
yeah, it can. Trying to base things too much on our favorite fiction can be a trap because what works in a story doesn't necessarily work in a game. A commenter a bit ago brought up how if in the stories of medieval saints' lives, they always have the right miracle for the job. I don't think that works in a game. And I'm going to say some OSR history, heresy here. I don't think that. I think there are a number of cleric and wizard spells that just shouldn't be spells. Spells should not directly solve a problem. Like knock shouldn't be a spell. That's a bad spell.
I agree with you totally. It
Yeah.
totally shuts down the rogue or thief or whatever it's called in whatever edition you're playing.
Sure, yeah, it does. But like even if there wasn't a thief at the table, it's still a bad spell simply because it solves a instead of it being okay. Sorry, I think that spells what they should do is even beyond niche protection is they should give an opportunity to apply them in a very clever way, and knock can't be applied in a clever way. It opens a door, right? There's no you don't have to think about it that much. You just think about, do I want this door open? Yes or no?
My counter to that argument is kind of twofold. Because in the first place, especially if you're playing old school, first off, your mage has to have that spell. If they don't, if they didn't roll it, if they didn't find it or anything like that, they don't have it. And even if they have it, they have to have it prepped ahead of time in order to use it. So they have to know ahead of time that, hey, I'm going to encounter a
I
locked
just
door.
want to point out that the rolling to know it, and if they fail, that's bad. Because in what was it, first and second edition, if they failed the check to roll the spell, they can't learn that spell.
Yeah,
That's
there's
bad.
that. Well, no, that kind of works.
That is bad game design.
No, it's not, Cringe. I'll tell you why. Because what I have found out through very painful trial and error is that if you allow a mage to take whatever spells they want, they will.
I'm
And
not saying
they will
that
blow your game
their
away.
spells as they level up, like in what was it, third edition. It's just the whole idea is they're locked out of that spell then, because they failed to check once.
Well, they're not locked out of it forever. They can always try again.
When?
At some other point, maybe when they gain another level.
There's the same thing with thieves. Like if thieves failed picking a lock, they couldn't pick that lock for the next level. That's bad.
No, it's not with thieves. You can always try again. But the other thing too is, okay, even if your mage has to have that spell or he doesn't have a spell, in either case, there's still like more than one approach to the door, because like if you don't have a thief in the party, you've always got your brute that can try to kick the door in. So there's always a third option on that.
We did have someone in a game use the knock spell to open the boiler on a steam-powered golem, so all the coals fell out. So there can be creative uses, but that's not the kind of thing that's going to come up very often, really.
Yeah. I mean, I like that use of it. It's a cool use, but it's...
Yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing with creative uses like that, I always wind up being up to GM fiat.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that anyways, then get weirder with it,
Well, I mean, I guess you could always use the knock spell on the bad guy's zipper and make their
Yeah.
pants fall down at the right time.
Or a sphincter.
Yeah,
And
ooh.
that's silly. It's very silly, but it's at least involving some player creativity. I think that's better.
People have used spider climb to enhance their grappling and things as well before, because it kind of adheres you to the surface. So,
Yeah. Also,
I mean, that just turns into Spider-Man then.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
CBK, welcome, by the way. I think it's the first time I've seen you here. Nice to see you. And you'll allow people to try to learn a spell. Yeah, and see, that's reasonable.
I'm gonna have to go. My head's spinning too much from taking the wrong meds this morning. So
Shit, you okay, dude?
yeah, it's just make me really sleepy, which I prefer to
Okay.
do at night. So, but nice to see you, Taylor, and I hope the rest of the conversation goes well. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Feel
I'm a bit
better,
too
man.
Spun out. Thank
Very
you.
grim. Take care, man.
Bye all.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I was counting on him to carry most of this interview.
Okay. I just found out that this was an interview with Taylor this morning, so
Yeah.
I mean, we can kind of just shoot the shit. I'm not a hard
that's what
person to interview.
Dungeons and Discussions usually turns out to be.
That's what
That's
it usually turns out to be anyway.
It's the more relaxed show.
So cringe. I want to hear. Is it cringe or cringe?
Kringe, just
Cringe.
because it's funnier.
Okay. Okay. So what is your argument for Wizards? What is your argument for that being bad game design with Wizards not having to learn?
No, I don't think they shouldn't be allowed to learn the spell. I have no
Okay.
issue with that. My issue is if I fail this check, I can't learn Fireball for another level. And think how slow leveling was back then.
Yes. What if you house ruled it so that if you fail the check, it represents like you need more research material or more lab space? Because Wizards always have labs in fiction, but I don't know what they're doing with that necessarily. What if you need to play
I would
around
be
with
okay
more?
with that. I mean, honestly, I just kind of went, if you failed it in the field, then you would have to take like a certain, like in off time, a certain number of days per spell level to like really just sit there and constantly study the spell. It's like an idea of like cramming for a test versus spending a week studying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was never a huge D&D fan.
All right.
I mean,
What do you
I played a
believe?
lot of like basic and second edition because that's what was around.
Sure.
You know, then World of Darkness showed up, and I was like, "Fuck you guys! I'm going
lot
over
of
there
people
with all
were.
the goth chicks."
A lot of people were. That is kind of what.
And I was in theater arts, so you know.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah. World of
It's,
Darkness is fun, but
Yes.
World of Darkness falls down on its core. How do I put this? World of Darkness thinks the writers of World of Darkness think that it's a very different game than it actually is.
That's the same thing I view 5th edition as. At
Yeah.
least when it first came out. It seemed like the designers were trying to capture the old school players and new players, which is a smart idea. But they
Sure.
didn't go far enough either way, and they just kind of stuck in the middle. It didn't really develop its own identity for a long time. It was just, oh, look, it's the D&D after 4th for me.
Yeah. It is.
Hold
I
on
think-
just a second. I'll be away from keyboard for just a minute.
Oh. Okay. Well, I was gonna I'll wait till he gets back to bring up that point. But I don't know. I like monks just because they're fun.
I know I have nothing against the martial arts archetype, but I kind of agree with Grim where most D&D settings, published
Doesn't
and
fit.
homebrew, are Western fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
and the name monk and the Eastern mysticism that comes with it just doesn't seem to fit with everything else. Same thing with psionics. I love the idea of like psionics and mind magic and stuff, but it was a whole new system. It didn't fit that genre of fantasy. It just seemed kind of tacked on because Gygax liked science fiction as well.
Yeah, maybe so. Psionics never really worked that well in 1st edition, in my opinion.
It didn't.
I'm sure
I
somebody.
never played 1st edition, but I read the books and I was like, who would use this? Psionics really didn't, for me, develop into its own thing till Dark Sun, when it was baked directly into the system.
Yes, that is also my opinion. That's kind of when Psionics kind of came into its own. Also, I think 3rd edition handled Psionics pretty well.
It handled Psionics well, but the classes were kind of lackluster.
A little bit, yeah.
Honestly, if you want to go for like the 3X family of games handling psychic magic best, it's Pathfinder. It was just like arcane magic, just psychic.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because the first time they introduced Psionics to 3rd edition, my GM complained because he thought that was way too overpowered. So I played a Psionic, and after a while, I eventually kept pointing out, oh, look, the mage gets to do all this, but I don't, and you think my class is overpowered.
Anybody who thinks Psionics is overpowered doesn't really read the Psionics rules. And
that was my whole point to him. Eventually, he conceded, okay, fine, I'll let you use your Psionics at full power. And I'm like, thank you. And then, of course, yeah, like you said, Pathfinder came out with 1st edition Psionics, and it was pretty much just like Arcane, and it was like great, except for
the classes were fun. I played a Psychic. I played
I played a Psychic. Yeah.
Let's see, though, was it a Mesmerist? The one who could it was the Halfling was the iconic character. I think it was the Mesmerist. I played that. I played an Occultist. I played pretty much every class in that book.
We did have a player who played I don't want to say elementalist, but whatever, the one that does all the pyrokineticist or whatever.
Yeah, the kineticist. The one that everyone said there's way too many rules for this one class.
Yeah.
But there really isn't, because if you look at pick any Pathfinder rulebook, how many spells are in that? Mm-hmm. Those are rules for a wizard.
Yeah.
I actually think it's am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I actually think it's kind of an issue that Psionics tends to not end up feeling that different from Magic. Like I want it to feel different from Magic. Maybe that's just like I'm not really coming up with a rational game design argument for why it would be better for it to be different from Magic, but like that's the promise, is it's not Magic. So why does it end up feeling like Magic?
From a game design standpoint, or like a game or lore standpoint, would you want an answer from?
Game design?
It's too many. It just would add too many moving parts to a complex system.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, you don't want it to feel like Magic, so you're not going to use Vancian casting. So that's a whole new way of casting I'd have to learn. So you go with spell points, which is probably the second most popular choice. That's something else I have to pay attention to, along with my spells, the checks I have to make for each spell, what stat the spells are keyed off. It's probably intelligence, but
I saw this.
Does not like Vampire the Requiem. I refuse to play Vampire the Requiem. That's bullshit. You know it, Ironcaster.
What you should do is you should use the Vampire the Requiem rule system for Vampire the Masquerade.
Nah, I'm good.
Chronicles of Darkness is a much better system.
No, I'm good with my 25th anniversary or my 20th anniversary edition. Thank you very much. I won't play 5th edition either because that's bullshit. I don't like them.
Because you're a grognard and you're like, it's new, I don't like it.
No, it actually isn't because it's new and I don't like it. There is a mechanic in Vampire, and I've discussed this with Grim before too, that I do not like in 5th edition, and that is the hunger mechanic. And that is, okay, every time you roll, you have like your little hunger dice that goes along with it every time you check. And if your hunger dice, hits sploogie, then all of a sudden, you accomplish whatever it is you want to, but you completely destroy, or in other words, or mess up whatever it is that you're trying to do. You succeed, but you do it in such a way as it's brutal because your beast came in, because you don't have blood point accountability anymore. So you're always hungry all the time. And the thing I don't like about that is it takes away from player culpability in anything. So it's kind of like, I didn't mean to rip this guy's throat out and drink him dry. My beast dice just went nuts. You know?
I mean, thematically, it fits.
I
do not sound like Jace now.
I feel like what T-shirt might be trying to like point at here is that they want vampire to make them feel like they are guilty for all of their poor decisions.
Yes.
Like, there is, weirdly enough that I'm thinking about this BoJack Horseman quote, "You are all the shitty things you do."
Yes.
And vampire is supposed to be about the shitty things you do. And if you have a moment when you can just
to add on
say,
to that real quick, it's about the shitty things you are forced to do.
Same
Yeah.
difference.
well,
There's a minor difference there. One is I have to do this. One is I know it's bad, but I'm going to do it.
But you can go about it in such a way to where it's not shitty.
Then are you really a vampire in that style of vampire?
Well, that's the thing. If you do it 5th edition, then no, because you're never responsible for the shit that you do, because it's always your dice fucked you.
Yeah, that's bad. That's
Yeah.
I'm sure game design wise it works fine. I honestly never looked at 5th edition, but it's a storytelling system as much as people seem to hate that word. Good morning, Sherry.
Hey, good morning, Sherry.
morning, Sherry. Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
game design is really about using numbers to make people feel things. And so I think from a game design perspective, taking that agency away is bad.
Mm-hmm. That would be my conceit also.
Yeah,
It's kind of a-
you know my stance on taking agency away when it comes to say stuff like the fuck you dungeons.
Well, okay, yeah, that's different.
It's still agency. Like, oh, I died just because I touched a doorknob. You know, I'm never gonna let that go.
I know. And remember, I did have a almost 6-hour conversation with James Edward Radji IV, and I did actually call him out on the fuck you dungeons. But
That entire game line is built on fuck you dungeons.
What did he have to say about the fuck you dungeons?
He loves them.
yeah, he says, is it a fuck you dungeon just because it's challenging?
That's not challenging. I died
So-
because I touched the door to the tower that you sent me to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like probably everyone else, I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring lately.
Oh yeah.
And
I quit.
yeah, I'm addicted to it, but I'm getting over it
Same.
because I don't actually think it's a very good. I don't think the world design works. And I talked about this on Twitter.
That's not why I have quit pretty much playing the game, but I see where you're coming
what-
from with that.
Why'd you quit?
They broke PvP for me.
I mean, yeah.
They need some major fixes for balance, and they're not doing it. Instead,
I'm
they're
having-
actively nerfing it.
I'm having fun with all the different builds. So
Elden Ring fucks up its world building so badly that it's actually managed to teach me a lot about world building in general. Just because it's such a potent example of what not to do to me.
well, it's written by George R.R. Martin. He's the guy who came
I
and
honestly
finished
don't
his own
think he
fucking
wrote it.
series.
What?
I honestly don't think he wrote it, and there's air quotes there. I think he just gave them names. Because honestly, the story is pretty much Miyazaki.
It
Yeah,
seems like it.
I think he was hired to be a consultant. I don't think anyone's really said he wrote the story. I think they said he was hired to help them with it, which is like that's a writer's room. That's a whole collaborative process.
He just
I'm
gave.
sure
I
he was
think
a voice in it.
honestly, I think he just gave them names because if you notice, every major NPC starts with a G, an R, or an M.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said, it was probably George R.R. Martin who wanted the horse in.
What?
No.
So
I could see them needing the horse.
Yeah, you really did need the horse.
I mean, that
in
map
game.
is huge.
Yeah.
they hated having the horse, though. They arbitrarily take the horse away from you at random points. And I played most of the game on an early patch where they randomly forgot to take the horse away from you in one underground dungeon where you were clearly not to have a horse. So I just got on Torrent and I just rode down this enemy over and over again in a tiny underground room, and it was an extremely easy boss fight. I actively ended up feeling pity for the enemy.
Yeah, I mean, there should have been a few more bosses where you could supposed to use the horse.
it doesn't feel like an open world game. It feels like an open world. It feels like they make you travel through an open world to get to the dungeons, which is what they really wanted to design. Like,
Yeah, I could see. I think they realized the mistakes they made with the Chalice dungeons in Bloodborne.
Mhm.
And
didn't play, but I
actively
have
tried.
heard of it.
The Chalice dungeons are a big part of the game if you're trying to get the platinum, and some of it is just pure bullshit. Like you have to fight one of the, I wouldn't say harder, but more complex bosses while you're at like half health at all times. And he has more health than when you fight him in the story.
That's just a challenge.
Yeah, but you have to do this to get all the bosses. And, you know, someone like me who plays the game for PvP and bosses, I had to fight these bosses I've already fought to get to a boss I didn't fight.
Yeah.
I think it's worth dissecting what we even mean when we say challenge. Like, is it? There's lots of things that are difficult that I don't find to be like engaging. Like it's I don't know. It's difficult to like put a screen back into a window, but I wouldn't want to play a video game of that.
Well, do you have to separate, say, challenging versus hard? Like, it's not hard. I mean, it's not challenging to drop an engine into a car. It's hard to do.
Yeah,
But it's really not a challenging task. I mean, you just drop it in.
yeah. It's not like there's a lot of stuff in sort of Souls-like games, at least the ones from Software, where I go, this isn't really. What was the distinction you're making? It's not really challenging, but it is hard. Like there's in Elden Ring in Caelid, there's this giant white dragon that just feels like it's part of the landscape because it just sits there, but you actually really can kill it. And I know this because I spent 20 minutes stabbing it until it died.
I needed to kill him for my build, so I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah,
The big sleeping one. Oh, that's the one you need for the achievement.
Yeah,
she's like basically free runes as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but you need to kill her for an
runes.
achievement. That's all she's there for.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think she was originally meant to be fully animated and all that other stuff, but for whatever reason they just said no, it's not, or we ran out of time, or
well, if you spent 20 minutes stabbing her, you should just get a bleed weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually had a bleed weapon that I normally use like a +7 Hound's Fang, which you get from this one optional boss.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly use it for
the jail.
Yeah, Evergale.
Jail. The word is pronounced jail.
Is it really?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Evergale. You can summon Blade for the fight. It becomes a really easy fight if you summon Blade, and then I've yet to find a more effective weapon in the game.
Oh, the Bloodhound's Fang is probably one of the best quality weapons in the game.
Yeah, a lot of people think that's broken, but I don't know. I never use it, so
it's not broken. It's just really good for that one specific way of building your character. Like if I was going to do a strength build, I wouldn't use it.
No,
but for a quality build, it is probably the best weapon in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually had I ended up using a poison weapon because I realized that it would probably build up steam faster.
Yeah, it's actually faster with bleed.
Okay, well then I messed
because
that
of the
up,
way
but
bleed works. Bleed works. It does a percentage of your max health.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing the argument you're making. I tried bleed for a while. I tried my regular weapon for a while, and bleed wasn't building up. She might just have a really high hemorrhage resistance.
Just get a katana.
No, bleed is
bleed is legitimately scary. This is coming from someone who does a lot of PvP. Bleed is legitimately a scary mechanic at the moment. They need to nerf it for PvP because I'm tired of running into rivers of blood. I'm tired of it.
It's been buffed since way back before the first patch. So now at this point, blood is pretty much like super duper powerful. I mean, you get Mvari's White Mask, you get Lord of Blood's Exaltation to buff up your weapons, and all of a sudden your bleed builds are just like proccing all kinds of damage. Super
and then you
duper
have
fast.
people running around dual wielding rivers of blood and spamming the weapon art.
Yep. It's pretty disgusting, but it works, so people use it.
Yeah.
I don't. I like to play hide and poke, so I get the big ass stone shield and the biggest spear I possibly can, and I just hide behind the shield and poke people and tank them.
That's also fun. But yeah, I Elden
Hey, Channel
Ring
66.
doesn't. Hey, Elden Ring does an absolutely terrible job introducing you to any sort of story. Like I can't predict anything about the world. Everything in it just seems random to me. Like I'm sure that there's lore, but I think I've found most of the lore by looking on the wiki, not by like actually seeing it in the game.
Yeah,
so I
that's
have no
just
real
FromSoft
ability to.
That's
formula. They've
FromSoft
been
in
doing
general.
that since like the first Dark
Yeah.
Demon Souls.
Yeah, but it makes me like the experience makes me much more skeptical of like making Gonzo fantasy to Gonzo.
Well,
I
just
wouldn't
curious.
call Elden
Oh.
Ring or any FromSoft game really Gonzo. Maybe
Nah.
Bloodborne.
it
would probably
doesn't
be the
really feel
closest.
Gonzo.
No, I mean it's
But
too
the thing
dark to
is-
feel Gonzo.
Have you actually read any of the item descriptions
I
in
have.
the game? Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you're supposed to get your clues from. And the one thing that FromSoft does very well, and I discussed this last week on dungeon building, is they're really, really good at environmental storytelling.
Yeah, and I mentioned the interconnectivity of it.
And the interconnectivity of it. Yeah. And that's the thing, is between that and the character dialogues and keep in mind too, sometimes the characters will not give you the dialogue unless you hit specific beats in the story. And knowing how to get that particular dialogue out of a character sometimes is key to understanding more about the story. Like a good example is Sorcerer Rogier. Most people don't have his full dialogue tree. In fact, I actually found out the other day that there's a whole section of dialogue that I had been missing because I'd been doing stuff in a different order than what you should be doing it, I guess, in order to get his entire storyline progress. So
Yeah,
there's
that's sort of my point. Is that ends up that is bad from an immersion perspective, because it just leads me to sort of shrugging and going, okay, this
But
game isn't going to tell me anything.
It is good
care
from
that
a
much.
replayability perspective, which you need for
Yeah.
a video game.
Yeah, there
That's
is that.
That's one of the biggest problems. People are like, oh, I want to put this thing from my favorite video game into a role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game, and they tend to forget that there are different things that work for tabletop that don't work in a video game, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's very true. People think they generalize much more than they actually do. I think that they're really, really different mediums, and honestly, I think that if anyone says I want to put a thing from video game into tabletop, they've already fucked up.
You could say I am inspired by this thing in this game, and I want something similar to it, but I'm not going to port it like directly.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like at any one time, you can jump up on YouTube and punch in Elden Ring and lore, and you will be bombarded with lore videos out the ass. So clearly, there's tons and tons and tons of story and lore in Elden Ring that is being found by other people.
Yeah,
And
I guess it
I
could
love-
just be a skill issue.
Yeah, I mean, and I
You have to
watch those
get
a lot
good.
of times because I like the story myself. But do keep in mind too that somebody is created a Dark Souls role playing game.
Oh, don't even get me fucking started on that.
I mean, it just seems like a cynical cash in to me, right?
I wouldn't say it was cynical. I would say, because it's Steamforged. Steamforged clearly has like a love for the Souls game, and they did okay with the board game. I have issues with the core mechanic of the board game, but they did okay with it. I think they just got lazy.
Yeah, they did. And they obviously didn't have good proofreaders or playtesters for
I
some
don't
of
think
this
they
stuff.
had proofreaders.
Yeah, it might be.
Like, it gets harder to cast self buffs on you as you go up in level.
Well, not only that, but it's kind of like, how are you really going to run a Dark Souls role-playing game? Because it's like unless you're an insanely avid player of all the Souls games and you know all the lore, and even then the lore doesn't necessarily connect itself between games very well. It's kind of like,
All right, let's say
how do you build
I
a
got
narrative
this.
out of all this?
I got this. You want to build a Dark Souls role tabletop game, right?
Right.
Sure.
Well, you want to run a Dark Souls campaign. Let's not worry about like building a game because they already did that and
Okay.
screwed that up.
Sure.
You want to run a Dark Souls tabletop game. First, you need your system.
Okay.
So let's just go 5e. It's the biggest one. Get rid of death saves. You
Yeah,
only get
sure.
like a long rest. You have to cut back on player, not player power, player options.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's wrong. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. You can't let them be running around as like, juggernauts. Honestly, if I was going to do a Dark Souls tabletop, I would probably go with something like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition,
Yeah,
Sure.
that's a good game.
where you start off weak. And then if you survive, you have the power. I mean, because look at a high-level Souls game. A high-level Souls game is pretty much, it's a power fantasy. I'm throwing fireballs, breathing out dragon fire, and just demolishing things.
I would
Sure.
almost say RuneQuest would be better for it, just because of the fact that at first level you get pretty much all the hit points you're ever going to get. So
Yeah, but
I like
in
systems
Souls, you
like
can
that.
build up your hit points.
well, I mean, in RuneQuest you can sort of build up your hit points a little bit, but not very much. But you can build up your skills a tremendous amount, and
Well,
yeah,
I didn't mention RuneQuest because I have very little experience with it.
Oh well, I'm a big I'm a RuneQuest aficionado.
Yeah, I went with the
like
games I know. I mean, honestly, if we're going system mastery, like what I know I could run, it would probably be a modified version of Pathfinder 1st Edition or Shadow of the Demon Lord,
Yeah, there you go.
because those are the games I know I could run.
But I don't know, just the whole idea of being able to tell a soul story would be difficult, because it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's not like there's a whole bunch of NPCs that just hang around and you could talk with. They're the typical stuff that you have in a TTRPG is absent in a Souls game or even Elden Ring. There's not a lot of NPCs hanging around to interact with. There's not villages and stuff that you can go into and buy shit and hobnob with the locals. There is no world building. I mean, no domain play per se. It's
Yeah.
It can be done, but it's a huge investment of time on the GM's part, and
Yeah.
I'm lazy, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, a project that I've been working on for a good long while now with a friend of mine is very emphatically not Souls inspired, but it is about the PCs traveling through a weird, crumbling world where even reality is collapsing and all of the societies are degenerated and they're ruins of their former glory and so on and so forth. And it has orders of magnitude more NPCs in it than any Souls-like game, because of course it does. I mean, it's mostly like structured as actually a road trip. It's like a road trip through the post-apocalypse. Like
So,
the idea
like-
is you
Gamma World post-apocalypse or D&D post-apocalypse?
D&D post-apocalypse. It's
Because most
heavily
published
inspired.
settings by TSR were all post-apocalypse.
Yeah. But it's heavily inspired by like us talking about like fourth to like I guess like 5th to 6th century Europe.
It's a good time period for what you're going for.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
And, like, just-
right after the fall of the Roman Empire and everything is in decline.
Absolutely. Or even like I would almost say like more ruined than that. Like people have just it's so ruined that it's almost comical. Like it's a little bit funny and cheery. Just how is like a big thing in it is that there's just piles of trash from the old world everywhere, and most of the residents don't have to work anymore because the population has just collapsed. So they can just sort of dig through the trash of their ancestors to get useful shit.
So what you're talking about is like the end of the Mycenaean palatial civilization around 11,000 BC to the beginning of the Archaic
that's
Age,
probably that's a better analogy for it.
where they
yeah.
literally didn't even remember their own history.
So it's closer to the Bronze Age collapse, is what you were saying?
Yeah, I think that's a better analogy for it. We read a lot of like collapse archaeology in general, and the Bronze Age collapse did come up a number of times.
Well, most people don't realize how devastating that collapse actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. It's interesting to me how fantasy literature obviously owes a huge amount to like collapsed civilizations, but it's interesting how little effort there often is to like read up on the non-fiction of that. Like, what does the archaeology of collapsed civilizations actually look like?
Well, that's the difference between, say, like an RPG setting and a fiction setting. Because honestly, like, I work on fiction. I have multiple stories I've been working on.
Sure.
The reader doesn't need to know all that.
Yeah. But the
But
player
for
does.
RPG
Like, the player
setting,
needs to be able to.
You need at least some basis, or not even the player, the DM, so they can feed it to the players.
Well, I've hammered on about this a lot on Twitter. So you need some sort of understanding of cause and effect on the player end to have a meaningful sandbox. Because you need like
the goblins have stuff and I want stuff, and the effect is I go get stuff.
Well, sure, but like maybe you like the goblins live in this warren, so I'm going to be a clever player, and I'm going to roll boulders over all of the entrances that I can find, and then I'm gonna, I don't know, direct a river through the rest of the warren.
Well, that's not really. Yeah, I was thinking cause and effect more of like the story wise than like how the world works.
I'm talking about like how the world works, or like, I don't know, maybe you want to like surround all the entrances to all the exits to the warren, and you just want to wait until the goblins starve, like, and then that brings up like, okay, what do goblins eat? Do they have a food source down there? And if they have that food source, how many of them can that feed? How much scavenging do they do outside of it? So like, if you want the players to be able to think outside the box, there has to be things they can do to the world that they have effects that can be predicted. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of, as much as I hate using this goddamn word in RPG conversations, the verisimilitude of the world.
Yeah. And
I understand the need for it, but I just hate using it in conversations and arguments, because it just seems like, oh, that's just an easy way out. But yeah, I mean, that's why most popular fantasy settings aren't too off the walls.
Yeah, but like let's say you want to go kind of gonzo about it. You want to say, oh, actually, the goblins are a metaphor for the sin that dwells in the hearts of men, and so on and so forth. And that's fine. But then that just leads the players to asking, okay, so if we get the villagers to stop sinning, will the goblins stop being able to reproduce? And will they all die of old age? And can we then go in and get their shit?
I mean, at that point, just gird your loins and pick up the sword.
Well,
sure.
Grim and I had these conversations in like the first 2 episodes of Dungeons and Discussions, and that was, what the long-term effects on world civilization would be if you had people running around who could, say, tap into the power of gods and continually raise people from the dead, or cure diseases, or all this other stuff. How much power and influence would these people wield over common folks? Because it would be immense.
Yeah,
and game breaking. And the other point of contention is like, okay, the other half of that coin is the mages and arcane magic. Is how much power could these people wield to destroy, create, or otherwise mess with world civilization as it exists? Because you have mages out there with just a kind of unchecked power doing whatever they want to. I mean, with wish spells giving them power over all reality itself.
Kind of the Forgotten Realms thing where every bartender is a 20th level something.
Yeah, but Forgotten Realms is stupid because every bartender is a 20th level mage. It makes sense.
There's the difference between fiction and role-playing again. Because if you notice, most fiction that has a large number of wizards, or even just wizards in general,
if you had a large number of wizards in the world, your world would be completely controlled by wizards.
Yes, if you look at fiction where large numbers of wizards do exist, they usually do run the world. But also, if you look at fiction, because it's fiction and it's not somebody playing it, there's always drawbacks to the magic. They don't have that in role-playing games because honestly, it's just not as much fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, nobody would want to play in it, or everybody would want to play whatever the most powerful class is that is in charge of everything. I mean, who wants to play a thief in a world where every single person in it is a freaking mage and can, undo everything that you do?
So
that's why those games always have like a mage hunter type class.
Yeah, they would need it. But see,
we keep cutting Taylor off. Let him speak.
Obviously, the easy way out of this world building wise is just say, well, actually, mages and any warrior powerful enough to be a fighter and any thief that good enough to be a rogue, these are all super rare people. Of course, if you say,
like
I don't know,
like Galarian.
What?
Like Paizo did with
Galarian.
Yeah, there's not a lot of high level people running around.
Yeah, of course, Edge of Time, DCC has magic consequences, and I agree that those need to be in the game.
I don't think they always need to be in every game. I think it depends on the game. Because if you want to look at magic with consequences, read Mage.
We're getting off into a different tangent, but let's let Taylor finish his first thought.
I once held a poll on Twitter, which is obviously not the most accurate thing or anything, but people said that they thought that maybe one person in 1,000 should be a cleric. Yeah. But if you look at, like, I don't know, middle of the Middle Ages, what is it, like London around 1200? That's like a 30,000 to 40,000 person town. So that means there's like 30 to 40 people in it who have powers that like a 1 to third level mage, a 1 to third level cleric is like somewhere in the power level of Jesus. Like that's mostly where the powers come from.
No, except for the whole raising the dead thing, which is
I don't know. He maybe while he was in the desert, he killed a bunch of orcs and got some XP, and
that was all role playing experience.
Yeah. That's being tempted by Satan is like 10,000 XP.
Yeah, but the crazy element to that though is you're talking about in historical terms, these are like all clerics of a single god. Now imagine if you have an entire pantheon of gods and they all give power to their followers. Now how many times is this going to be multiplied?
But that's the thing. He's going by population number. It's not anything to do with who they're worshiping. Because even back then, there were other people being worshipped, not as like the majority as Christianity was, but there were still followers of like, there were still outskirts followers of like ancient British gods and Celtic gods, and the Saxons were there, so there were some followers of Wotan at one point.
Yeah,
but that's also not power level. That's just number of clerics.
I mean, even if there's 30 or 40 first level clerics in London in 1200, that still seems like a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. It's hard to, it's hard to imagine that the place would keep looking roughly like London in 1200.
Well, yes. No, it wouldn't at all because of magic.
Yeah. I guess my broader point though is that I think that a better solution for this is to look very critically at the spell lists of spellcasters and then just cut out a bunch of things from them. Like, I think that spellcasters shouldn't have spells that obviously solve any adventuring problem, and I think they shouldn't have spells that obviously do damage to anyone. And I fully acknowledge this is a controversial opinion.
I don't see an issue with it, but like no direct damage or like no damage at all.
I would say no direct damage.
Okay, because I was going to say like calling, like if you're outside a druid summoning up like a lightning storm that in the area will do damage. Don't see an issue with that.
Well,
I think it's cool if like someone uses shape water to drown someone.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I will say Lamentations of the Flame Princess, one of the things that I really admired, and I told James this, is the fact that his spell list is very curated. And there is a damage spell for mages, but it is good at all levels, and it's the most basic spell. It's Magic Missile. And in fact, there's an entire book of how to do magic missiles differently in his system. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for spell creep from like a say spell or a game design standpoint is because adding new spells is easy.
Yeah.
So that's why you always get spell creep.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is the more powerful the mage gets, the more powerful your spells are supposed to get, and therefore the more problems it solves, and that makes it harder and harder on GMs.
I mean, this is why I ironically think that weirdly freeform magic tends to be less overpowered.
Yeah, it's a little harder to manage because I hated mage. I still can't understand their magic system after all these years. That's why.
Mage that's one of those games that's great to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You see, what was it last week or the week before, where I was talking about that one thing that happened in my mage game, that chemical that they summoned, and Grim looked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically like Satan's hot sauce. It will burn ash.
Yeah.
And this is a real chemical.
Yes, it is. Well, I mean, yeah, that's like, using, transmute water to, transmute earth to cesium in a castle's moat, and you watch the whole castle explode. Because cesium is extremely reactive, or potassium even. But okay, one of the things,
trend that I've noticed.
Well, we have seen one of the major stopgap points in Magic is whenever you get the fly spell. When a mage gets the fly spell, that allows them to circumvent so many obstacles, and that's kind of where the game starts to change from that point on.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I mean, it destroys overland travel. It destroys.
Yeah.
You could wall. Oh, there's a wall on this castle.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Is like just having that one spell changes your game so much, and a GM who's not ready for that, it will throw them into a tizzy pretty quick.
And fly is what, 3rd or 5th level, so it's not a high. It's not like Wish.
It's 3rd level.
Yeah, I never remember where spells are. I don't play Wizards.
I think there's a decent argument to be made for just taking the fly spell out of the game if you don't think you can manage it.
Well, yeah, I don't see an issue just cutting spell lists.
Except the converse to that is now you have, in almost every game system now, you have like a PC race that can fly at 1st level. Whether it's the Aarakocra or the Strix or whatever. So, same problem. Now you get it earlier.
I mean, frankly, okay, so if there's going to be a PC race that can fly, castles don't have walls anymore, they have domes.
Or a really good selection of ballistas and crossbows and air defense.
Yeah, they'd have both.
Yeah, they'd have both.
You don't rely on one form of defense.
Yeah. But yeah, the flight thing is a good point. I don't know. I don't think it's that hard to make freeform magic systems that are both easy to adjudicate and aren't hugely long. Like for that game that I've been working on with a friend, the mage has freeform magic, and the rules for the mage class, including those magic rules, are 2 pages long.
Wow.
And they would have been, I'll just give you a full-on word count, because I'm looking at it right now. 535 words. People overcomplicate how... I think people overcomplicate rules a lot because they feel like they need to like defend them from people who are going to be smart Alex, and try and break the rules. So you'll get someone who you'll get someone who lists like three different pages of what exact modifier every possible situation gives. But on the other hand, I'll just be like, okay, list off all the sources of advantage. They cause you to step up your die size. List off all the sources of disadvantage. They cause you to step down your die size. That's it. Because like you could really trip over yourself trying to make rules that can't be circumvented. But like, if someone just wants to be an asshole, they're gonna find a way to be an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the fun for a large group of players, myself included at times, is to see if I could break the system.
Yeah, and
that's why I played like 3.x for so long.
Yeah.
So if someone's gonna want to do it, you're never gonna make like a Fort Knox of role playing game systems.
Yeah, and generally speaking, the more complicated, I mean, what I would always think as a player, the more complicated the rules are, the easier it's going to be for me to eventually find some way to really break it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see 3.x.
Yes, yeah, and that's a good point too. I haven't. We've been playing 3.x pretty much since it came out in 2000, so 22 years of 3.x. Now we've modified it with Pathfinder, which kind of actually gave it some more longevity, because one of the big problems with 3.x and 3.5 was being shoehorned into prestige classes, because they were all about prestige classes, which prestige classes were stupid. And I think Pathfinder really, really did a great job by cutting back on the number of skills and by allowing archetypes, even stacking archetypes.
Archetypes were great. Archetypes were basically kits from 2nd edition.
Yeah. But one of the biggest problems that we've had with it is the fact that they introduced an entire engine of spell creation and magic item creation and everything like that. And we found that has really, really messed with the game, because we have PCs who want to do nothing but sit around and make magic items to make life easier all the time. And it gets really, really, really tedious.
Yeah, but it also gets stupid expensive at a certain point, doesn't it?
It does, but
I mean, you're not being an idiot and using the mythic rules, are you?
No, God, no, we're not using the mythic. We've never used the mythic rules.
Please don't. Save yourself. Don't make the mistake I did.
No, we won't. But I mean, even just with the baseline rules, it's just like, there are so many shortcuts that you can use. And I think that was the other problem too, is the fact that they allowed you to find ways to shortcut it. Okay, if you have multiple apprentices working on that, it lowers the DC. If you have this happening, you can lower the cost. If you do this, you can, and eventually it just gets to where you got mages who are cranking out magic items. I mean, I'll tell you how broken this is. In 3.0, we had a mage who literally had a spell rigged to where it could make masterwork composite bows every single day.
Jesus.
And he made a living selling masterwork composite bows every single day for even at half cost, and he could easily, supply King's make. It got ridiculous. And, my eventual conceit to the GM was this kind of like, dude, if he can do this, so can every other mage in this world. So why is he getting any special preferential treatment? Why are his prices better than everybody else's?
That's why Masterwork longbows?
Mm-hmm.
Masterwork longbows are still the same prices they are in the player's handbook, because that's the supply.
Well, that's the thing. You have a spell that can actually make any item masterwork. I'm like craftsmen would never be able to practice their craft if a mage could crank things out faster than a craftsman could work. I mean, there'd be no cause for blacksmiths.
Answer to that. And if there's any members of the Bro SR here, I'm sorry. Rules as written is stupid. You don't have to play rules as written. That's the joy of RPGs. Every table can rip apart the game and play it their way.
Yeah, this is just true.
Yeah, Kit, that's true. You can gatekeep your table with extreme prejudice. We can't gatekeep our table. There some people have to be included because of living conditions. So it's kind of like this person's always going to be in the game because he lives there and it's his house.
Well, yeah, it's his table.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying rules is don't play the game rules as written.
Yeah.
As
yeah.
the GM, like one of my players would try to do that, I'd just be like, yeah, no.
I mean, okay, so if I was the GM over that situation, I would basically say, okay, fine, I'm going to give them enough rope to hang themselves and say, well, if you're the first person in the world to do this, clearly the world is entering a period of rapid magical invention. So it's time for me to make a magical invention table, and I'm going to roll on that every single before every single session now, and we'll see which institution has been overthrown with magic this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just pushing the world into an industrial revolution, but with magic
Yeah.
instead of steam power.
Mhm.
Yay! It turns out it's 1840.
Yeah, and that was the
Everything
other.
you
Welcome to Victorian England, guys.
That was the other
Yeah.
conceit too, is the fact that if you have magic that can do everything, it drastically reduces the impact of scientific discovery, and therefore a lot of inventions would never happen.
I
Because you can do
think
it with
a
magic
lot of those
cheaper.
inventions would happen just differently. That's why I said it's magic. It's a magic powered industrial revolution as opposed to say coal. I mean, we're not
Yeah.
going to have children dying of black lung, but invent a magical disease.
Yeah.
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 There's also just the simple fact of I'm sure the PCs like the existence of some institution in their world. Will the PCs like it when it turns out that now you can arm any peasant with whatever the fantasy equivalent of guns are, and
Well, that's
now
just like
old
the
knightly orders.
fantasy railgun loophole from 3rd edition.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
The fantasy railgun. Yeah.
And now the king, who was probably their patron at this point, or whoever their patron is fucked. And now the PCs have to fight in the English, whatever the equivalent of the English Civil War is, in magical land.
Eventually, that's kind of what broke the power of kings anyway, was the rise of
Yeah.
the merchant class and the fact that they could field bigger armies and had more money than the kings did. So
Yeah. And then past a certain point, they'll be like, wow, my also I mean, sure, you can let the mage disrupt the bow manufacturing industry, and then the next session, several people in town are copying the mage, and then the session after that, bows, masterwork composite bows, drop to like 10% of their previous price. I mean, that's let them have the thing, just give them the full consequences. That's what I say.
Or if you're if you want to, it could go a totally different direction. Like the mage now becomes like a mafioso boss. It's like, we want to control all the bow making in this area right here. So go put those guys out of business.
Yeah. I mean that the player can do that, and that's a whole campaign. I mean, that's sort of the beauty of like really showing players that there's cause and effect to their actions. Is they will start doing things like becoming a mafioso, or I don't know, trying to get the king to institute a
ban.
a ban or something, or some sort of magical research council that's like really there to like ban problematic magical research or whatever.
Go shut down those illegal bow makers.
Yeah. I mean, you give players a reason to care about the world by if you show players that their actions matter to the world, they'll start caring about it. And then when they care about the world, they'll do more things to it. And then you get, I guess at that point, you get to just stop prepping sessions because they'll make your own session for you.
There is that element to it.
Yeah.
My other problem with that too, of course, is the fact that while the mage is having all this fun coming up with all this cool stuff, your other characters are sitting around going, well, yeah, this is fun. We get to sit around the entire session and watch the mage do his shit, and we don't get to go adventure because the mage needs to stay in town with all his equipment, and it gets irritating after a while because it's just kind of like you're going, okay, well, we've been trapped in town for weeks and weeks watching the mage, crank out the money machine, and it's nice to have the money, but now we don't have any incentive to go out and do anything because the mage is making tons and tons of money.
Well, you could, I don't know, you could ask the thief if they're getting up to crimes or whatever. But yes.
Yeah. I guess you could do that. I mean, it almost introduces domain play at a really, really low level.
Yeah, it does. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
I don't know. I do kind of like DCC's thing with the magical consequences and corruption, and that's a nice way to foil it. But at DCC also, from my understanding, and we haven't played it yet. I plan to get around to play testing it at some point with my friends. But DCC, from what I understand, is if your character is like first or third level or something like that, they're really, really super powerful compared to the average character because your characters literally in that game start out at 0 levels. So anybody who does manage to get to like 4th or 5th level or 6th level is like a major hero or a small time god to everybody else because they wield powers that the average man can't even comprehend, which is how it should be.
Yeah. I don't find that objectionable. But it does, like, when you're a minor god, it stops making sense to like go in a hole and potentially die there. And you end up going, I wonder, how much the local king will pay me not to kill him.
Yeah, it just changes the scope of the subgenre of fantasy you're in. It'll go from, say, like a dark fantasy to like pure epic fantasy after a certain point. And if you're not ready for that, you kind of have to put roadblocks in the way where it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah. One of the games I like to run is Godbound, where the characters literally start off as demigods with power that is just so ridiculous to the point where, to illustrate to the players how powerful their characters really were, I threw 2 groups of 24 armed men at them at first level. Now most people would be like, "Oh my god, that's a death sentence," because you're fighting 48 dudes at first level, even if they only have 1 hit point apiece or whatever that.
In Godbound, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, in Godbound, not a big deal. It's like one of the characters was playing a dragon. So of course he breathed and completely destroyed one entire group in one breath because he managed to crit it. And the other guy, took out most of that group in the second round, and it was nothing. But that was my way of illustrating them. Like, this is how powerful your characters really are.
So it's basically rifts where your enemies don't have MDC.
Well, yeah, basically, because it's like your characters are so powerful that their mundane armies really don't stand much of a chance against them. Mundane monsters don't necessarily stand that big of a chance against them, but that's not the point. The point is you're trying to accomplish bigger and more powerful things. You're on a scale where you are a god. I mean, even a first level demigod is so much more powerful than your average human, and it really, really shows. It's just, but like I've told people too, Godbound is not an entry level game. I think Godbound is more fun for players who are experienced and have played plenty of OSR games or D&D games and stuff like that and have some experience and can actually appreciate how powerful their characters really are. But it is one of my favorite games to run, just because I like seeing what players will do.
I actually got paid to run a Godbound game.
Oh, wow.
Years ago.
Lucky you.
Yeah. It was weird because...
How'd you finagle that? I'd like to get paid to run Godbound.
Getting paid to run games is not that hard. Getting paid enough that you don't find it frustrating and weird is. I tried. So this was, God, years ago. I don't even know how many years ago. I think it was just when Godbound came out. Let's look up when that was. When did
Everything that guy puts out is really awesome.
Wolves of God seemed interesting too.
I hadn't picked up that setting yet, but
It's Anglo-Saxon. It's early Anglo-Saxon England.
mhm.
Like early enough that you've just recently been Christianized. So 2016. So
Not that long
a
ago.
while ago. Anyways, so getting paid to run games is not that hard. You can just advertise wherever.
People are always looking for it.
Really?
Yeah, people will take you up on it. But the issue is that you don't necessarily get to choose which game you're running.
True.
You don't have that much authority over your players because they're your boss.
Yep.
And anytime you advertise, a large number of third parties will message you being extremely mad that you're involving money in this section of the hobby because people don't like it. It's really weird. People really don't like it when you commoditize labor that they expect to get for free.
Kind of like art, I've noticed. Yeah.
Yes.
They expect, oh yeah, I'll give you exposure. Well, I can't eat exposure, dude.
Yeah. I remember, so I used to be much poorer and I was much more motivated to try and get money off of my RPG stuff. And there's this blogger called Throne of Salt, this OSR blogger called Throne of Salt. You might have heard of them.
No, I haven't.
Oh, good blogger, huge douchebag. He gave me this lecture about how I was ruining the hobby by expecting money for stuff that I wrote. And
You're a writer.
Yeah,
you should
you're a
get
writer.
paid.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever. I think the most I've ever asked for anything that I've ever done is $5 a pop.
That's reasonable as hell.
Most of my stuff is like $1 to $2. Is like $2. Like I think $2 I found is like the sweet spot for like a small several page supplement. But I think my prices are pretty reasonable. But his issue wasn't whether or not my prices were fair. It's that I was involving money in it at any level. I think that this is maybe going to be a controversial example. I think this is part of why people tend to not like prostitution so much. It's because it's involving like money in something that we expect to not have money involved in it.
That's a whole different can of beans.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I understand, yeah. And my own experience with it, I didn't get paid, but I did answer a ad in one of our local things, and a guy was saying, looking for a DM to run this game. And I showed up, nice guy, good group, but eventually it was kind of like the demands were getting kind of like overbearing to the point where I wasn't having fun running the game.
That's what you run into.
And literally, I think what coined the whole experience for me was when the guy literally told me to my face in front of all the players was, well, the GM is just here to facilitate our wishes. That's what they're here for.
I mean, that is how it ended up feeling when I got paid to run games.
Yeah.
And it wasn't enough money that I was being paid that I felt it was worth it.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not here to necessarily fulfill your wishes other than your wish to play a game.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I feel about it.
Remember that one group of people that hired me ended up firing me after one session because their characters stayed in the city the entire time, the starting city the entire time, and murdered several members of the City Watch, and then were pissed off that a bunch of other members of the City Watch showed up to arrest them.
As they would.
Yeah. And then they murdered those guys too. And I was like, okay, fine. You are now the subject of a major manhunt. They have surrounded the building you're in. They are calling for your surrender.
Yeah. I think what aggravated me the most about this game that I ran is, first, I wasn't getting paid for it, but I wasn't going into it expecting to get paid for it. I was going into it, with the expectation of having a gaming group. But the other thing that annoyed me was the fact that because I was running it at that guy's house, he was on his phone the entire game, every game.
Okay, wow.
And I mean, I'd be like, I was like, are you not enjoying the game? Are you not having fun? Can I do something different? I mean, I started asking these questions on the very first session. I was like, I notice you're on your phone a lot. Am I not entertaining you, or are you bored? And
Yeah.
by the 6th or 7th session, I had just given up because he was just on his phone the entire game. And I'm like, you're the guy who asked me to come run your game for you. And
yeah, that's intolerable.
What?
Yeah, it's extremely true. Kit Marlowe. I don't know who Kit Marlowe is, but they're a very intelligent person. I mean, honestly, when I see people criticize a lot of RPG projects that aren't Wizards of the Coast, they criticize them like they think that they're really professional outfits. No one in RPGs is a professional outfit. Wizards of the Coast is barely a professional outfit, and I think they're an entirely different market from the rest of tabletop role-playing games. There is... I remember that when I got to 700, when I got past 1,000 followers on Twitter. No, wait. It was even earlier than that. It was like when I got to like 600 followers on Twitter, people started treating me like I was the big, bad, successful person who was coming to like squelch their fun and was like a threat to them. And if I like argued with them on Twitter, I was like using my fans as like a cudgel or something.
Yeah, I've run into that, and I'm not even a game designer.
Yeah.
I cannot. I've actually, just to nip that in the bud, posted my like sales numbers on Twitter multiple times. They are not good.
Like, yeah, I've seen you post that a few times.
Yeah. I post it because it's a point that needs to be fucking made.
Yeah, it's something that Grim talks about a lot in his videos. It's a very, as he put it, the margins are razor thin.
The margins are razor thin. It's like the first time I'm still involved in RPG creation and design, and like I tell people, it's kind of like, I do make royalty checks from it, but honestly, it's like if I collected a few months worth of royalty checks together, I would have enough money to buy pizza and beer for a couple of nights, maybe. Oh, hey, Greg. You want to get in on this, man? I'll bring you in. I'll throw you a link if you're available. I don't know if you're working or not. Greg from Ares Adventures, real nice guy. Good dude. But
sure.
Yeah, it's like I was gonna ask that. I was kind of hoping Grim would have stuck around because one of the things I told him, I said, since Taylor does a lot of his selling on itch.io, I know that Grim has more experience with that than I do. Oh, okay, yeah. Greg, you're at work. And I was gonna ask, it's like why you choose to do itch.io instead of like something more big, I guess, like Drive Through RPG. Or even, God help me, the Judges Guild or Judges, whatever the fuck it is for D&D.
I
think that's Game Master's Guild.
Yeah.
Dungeon Master's Guild.
Yeah.
So that's an easy question to answer. So Itch gives me more money while being easier to use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Itch takes Itch actually lets you set the cut that they take just freely. You can choose 0%. Their default is 10%. Drive Through RPG takes either a 35% or 30% cut, and promotes you really less than Itch does. Itch is much easier to use. it's filled with people who are awful, but like those are just the customers of itch. Like those are just the people who are also on the platform. They can't actually like do anything to you about it. If I was going to get kicked off of itch because of the woke crowd petitioning whoever, it would have already fucking happened.
True. True. And actually, that was another thing that I was going to mention too, is the fact that, not too long ago we had a game jam where they actually used the term for Germans in the 1940s as a pejorative.
Yeah.
And they
Towards Grimm.
Yeah, towards Grimm, towards Pundit, towards Venger, and I'm friends with all three of these people. I'm not gonna say I support every single thing that they all say, because I don't Venger, I don't. I agree with very rarely.
There are things with
Venger
I agree with, just not the way he goes about them.
Maybe
Venger low-key advocated civil war so that he could. So Venger was arguing that the government should teach Christianity in public schools.
No.
And when I asked him how he intended to do this, he said that it could be a good idea after a second American Civil War.
I'm Catholic, and I disagree with that take.
Yeah, of course you do, because fun fact about Catholics, it's a minority religious group in America.
Yes.
There's no majority religious group in America. You can lump all the Christians together, but that only goes so far. There are doctrinal disputes. There are differences. You don't want your I tried like reasoning with him on this, of being like, do you want your kid going to school and learning a different version of Christianity than the one you want them to know to be into? I'm not a Christian, but like I was just trying to appeal to whatever I could with him. And he's like, I'm not worried about it. I'll be the majority religion after the second American Civil War.
You want a hint?
What?
This is going to sound terrible.
What?
But talking to Venger and Pundit, the best way to deal with them is just treat them as like WWE heels, because they play the part. They purposely kind of exaggerate some of the stuff they say. At least I hope.
Venger, I've talked with Venger a lot in private. I've talked with Pundit a lot in private. Pundit is playing something of a role. I don't think
he's much more, I'm the Undertaker and everyone else is Hulk Hogan at this point.
Yeah.
But it's some
Venger
of the
just
tongue in
believes
cheek.
the things he says. Venger 100% believes the things he says.
Well, for my sanity, I will go with my interpretation.
Okay.
Well,
I'm not attacking either of them. I like both of them. They've both put out some good products. I want to clear that up.
Well, all right. Here's my standpoint on it. Okay, it's like Venger is a nice guy, outside of his opinions, and I don't agree with his opinions. But other than that, he's a pretty nice guy. You could talk to him, you can have a reasonable conversation with him, and as long as you avoid, certain topics, he's a nice person.
Yeah, it's standard.
Pundit,
you're out drinking with your friends. There's certain things you don't talk about.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's fair.
And Pundit, I had on my show, and one of the first things that somebody told me was, "Good luck, having a show with Pundit and not, talking politics." Well, guess what? We had a whole show. We didn't talk politics. We talked pure game science, pure game mechanics. All the wonderful things about role-playing games, and it was a great show. And Pundit is a sweet guy. He's a nice guy.
Pundit's
but yeah, he does put on a.
Mm-hmm. I don't agree with his politics.
No,
all the time
I don't either.
But he can turn them off. Venger at this point has me blocked on Twitter because I pointed out that it was bad to call for a second American Civil War. And it seemed like he had maybe just threatened to murder me for not being Christian. And I was like, that's not how Christians work.
No, that's not how Christians work. Grimm, on the other hand, though, is a really dear friend to me. I love the man tremendously. And we started out, he was somebody I wanted to talk to interview. Yeah. And even after that, I found that I liked the guy, and we hit it off. A lot of his politics match mine. Not 100%.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I still like my guns, but
Well, you're from Texas.
I know I'm from Texas. But you know, for the most part, we get along on just about everything. His opinions tend to echo mine tend to echo his, and we have a lot of the same theories. We've both been canceled. We both had to deal with the woke scolds. We both had to deal with a lot of this stuff.
I think that's why I fit in with you guys so much, because I've been canceled actually recently.
Yeah, and didn't that kind of funny how that tends to happen? It's like, you know, these people create their own villains, and those villains tend to find camaraderie amongst each other, whereas they were hoping to isolate them.
If they call you evil enough, sooner or later you're just going to be like, you know what?
Well, it's like I tell everybody, you know, you're a villain in somebody's book. It doesn't matter what you do or who you are.
And I'll send you did you see the latest thing that happened with the cancel Green Gay party?
No, I did not.
Why are they canceling you now?
This was a month or so ago. They attacked me because I said something about law. The system of Western laws are based on religious morality. So they went into my tweets. Yeah, I'm not. But the one guy who was leading the charge, that Waluigi dude, he got outed as a sex pest yesterday.
Oh man, these Twitter people.
At this point, I mean, I don't even bother with it anymore. I just kind of laugh. But someone they all have me blocked, so I didn't know about this. But somebody was like, "You got to see this."
Wait, how are Western? I know this isn't the point. How I'm honestly asking, how are Western legal systems based on religious morality?
Well, look at the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, yeah, those are both legal systems. I guess are you making a historical argument, or?
I was just making a generalization. They kind of attacked me for other stuff before I was it started. It became a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the argument that a lot of our legal systems come ultimately from religious law, but I think that modern. I don't think it's a direct. Oh, no, I can just look at the actual tweet.
No, that's the thing where what happened with the guy. It's not the thing
about
the religious system, because everyone in that conversation had me blocked, and this is the guy who started the "Let's attack Green Gay" for a few days. You remember a T-shirt?
I do. I do.
I mean,
but that's what happened with the guy, and he vowed to wipe me from the tabletop community because I don't belong there.
I think that people need to understand that it's impossible to fight a war of extermination on Twitter.
It is, and I think they're terminally online to a certain degree. And
yeah, they don't.
I mean, I've seen people go after you. I've seen people go after T-shirt. I've seen people go after a lot of I've seen people go after Aaron, for Christ's sake.
People go after Grimm all the time.
Yeah. I think that we're reaching a point where in a lot of cases so many people have been canceled that they're running out of people to cancel, and they're running out of potential people who are afraid of being canceled.
So now they're eating themselves.
Oh, it's an
Ouroboros.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you just say Jormungandr. It's easier.
And
it's the serpent that eats his own tail.
Yeah, I mean, after a certain while, I mean, if you just are constantly searching for enemies, you're going to find them.
Yes.
They may not really be enemies, but you're going to find them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I predicted it a few years back. I was like, these guys are going to eat themselves before too long, because
it's one of the reasons I pretty much have stepped back from tabletop Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have kind of stepped back from it myself. I've seen so many people attacked on it. I mean, it seems like Grumpy Grognard is always getting into a fight with people. And I mean, when they started going after Yo Dano, I was kind of like, really? Why?
It's because Yo Dano wouldn't cancel some. What I heard from Yo Dano was that they wanted to basically run his account for him.
Oh.
And that one guy who I had a few run-ins with, Draco, also has a Dragonlance community.
Yeah.
That isn't as big as Dano's.
So of course he wanted that.
Yeah.
He's back, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I seen.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
mean, at this point,
honestly, I feel
I just want to throw dice at my friends.
yeah.
And all the shit they say isn't going to change that.
That's
My
true.
my long-term suspicion is that like okay, so you know how like in the 1920s like fucking cocaine was just a thing you could get in drugstores?
Yeah.
I feel
Go
like
back to that.
yeah, maybe we should. I feel like the drug war has not gone well for anyone
No.
other than private prisons. But
And cartels.
yeah. No, it hasn't gone well for anyone who's a good person. I'd rather have tweakers on the streets than this. That's the trade-off. I'll make it.
Yeah,
But
if you see a tweaker, you could just avoid him.
yeah, whatever. It's yeah. But like, my honest suspicion is that like in 20 to 50 years, social media will be illegal. Just because it's such a socially corrosive force. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a positive development because that's going to be part of like general clampdowns on free
I would
speech.
say it would be definitely be pared back and have much heavier oversight, but I don't think it's going to be fully illegal.
Because we've had
Way
We've
too
had
many
one
things are
form
being integrated into social media is being integrated into way too many things. It will always be around some form of it. It may 20 to 30 years, that was the timeline you said. It might change so we won't recognize it at all.
Yeah.
Well,
I
even
mean-
way back in the day, we had BBSs and stuff like that too. So there's always been
I don't
some
know.
form of social networking.
I'm not saying that I think this is a good thing at all. I just think that governments are increasing in power and they're gonna this is
Well,
a
that's a bad
place they're
thing.
gonna seize power. Yeah, that's a bad thing, I'd say.
Yeah.
But like if you look at like how social media works in China, like
Mhm.
the government oversees everything. They'll like stop things from going viral and shit.
The credit score.
Yeah.
The social credit score thing is actually mostly a Western misconception.
Huh.
They actually have a bunch of different largely independent systems for tracking their citizens, but they don't have one cohesive one.
Which would make that kind of makes sense. Way off topic though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to get all, super duper political.
Yeah,
and all
we're
this
trying
stuff.
to head towards politics.
Yeah.
And we should
Yeah,
avoid that.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure I'll get canceled over something I said on this.
oh no. Well, it's but since you're on my show, you'll get me canceled.
Oh god.
But yeah, I think suffice it to say, it's I don't know where the tabletop role playing game industry is going, but the nice thing is, I mean, and this is my just kind of like from my observation. At our table, like I said, we played 3.x Pathfinder and everything like that since 2000. We've been playing it for 22 years. We're still playing it. And for the most part, we have played it largely without the influence of anything outside of our table. Because up until recently, when I started YouTubing and getting into social media and hearing all this garbage that's going on out there, it was never a concern at our table. It wasn't until I got up on Twitter that I first heard somebody claim that, orc is code for black people, which is ridiculous. And the most hateful and awful thing that I have ever heard in my entire gaming career. Because as I've said it on multiple occasions, 30 plus years of role-playing experience, and I have never once heard any sort of a euphemism that equates a black person with an orc ever, or any race of a fictional fantasy nature with a real world culture or stereotype.
Because
I've
people who
never
aren't
heard that.
terminally online understand that they're fictional.
Exactly. So, like I said, we've largely been playing our game, keeping to ourselves, doing it our way, and we're mostly happy with it. And it may end up being that we just all need to go back to that, just ignore
Yeah.
what people say online and just do shit the way we want to and fuck what other people say.
Well, I've
because
said it.
it doesn't impact us one way or the other. It's like if you don't want to
really
buy this
doesn't.
book, don't buy it. If you
Yeah,
if
well,
you don't
that's-
agree with this company's politics, don't buy their shit.
I've said it multiple times. The strength of tabletop as a hobby is the decentralized nature of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because these
Like-
people, no matter what they say, they can't come into your house. They can't take away your books. They can't take away your dice. They can't stop you or forbid you from role playing. Now, they may create petitions and things like that, and they may get you canceled if you are trying to publish. But even
then, there's going to be just contrarians who will buy your shit because
yeah, exactly. I mean, Fatal, somebody buys that. Somebody plays it.
I own a
Yeah.
copy of Fatal.
See? I
Do
mean,
you
know,
really?
I
Like a
collect
physical
I collect
copy?
bad RPGs. I don't have a physical copy. I know someone who does. I have
Wow.
Fatal. I have Rahoa. I have I had a PDF of Wraithu, but it got corrupted and I can't find a new one.
Yeah, I actually bought a copy of My Farog so that I can evaluate it for its actual content. I don't give a shit about Varg. I don't give a shit about his politics. It's like, yes, I know he is a bad person. That's not the point. The point is, can he write a good game? Can he make a cohesive game? Does his game have any game value? Is it worth it?
Is there any game value? I mean, isn't My Frog mostly just an elaborate?
It's an OS.
Like-
Though I read the first edition. The first edition was basically just an OSR club.
Yeah, it is. It's very largely. It seems like a lot of OSR. From what I've read of it thus far, it is very heavy duty. Viking tradition lore type stuff. So it's in that way, it is pretty authentic. I like the way he handles certain aspects of things, but at the same time, there are some other underpinnings to the setting and to what's written in that book that very, very much are declarative of how he feels about people who are not his people, to put it nicely.
And
I mean,
the thing
that's
is, to make it a
another
workable role playing game, if it does have a solid system, can that be excised?
Exactly. Yeah. Does
I
he have a
mean-
good system or not? So that's all I care about.
It feels like he mostly just stole the system if it's just standard OSR. Like I don't know. I've talked about this a lot on Twitter a bit recently. Is like OSR builds on a solid tradition, but sometimes it just can't really innovate.
Right.
That's my biggest issue with OSR as a whole. It's like, why do I need this clone when I still have my copy of the Cyclopedia, or I still have my second edition books, or bring something new to the table?
Right. And ultimately that's kind of what I do when I pick up new OSR products is I'm looking for a good set of rules to steal from.
That's pretty much the OSR thing. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
most OSR systems are just, this is my house rule notebook prettied up.
Right. Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but the people who are like, OSR is the future. No, if there's no innovation, there's really not much of a future.
No.
Yeah.
It's just your rules versus my rules.
I mean,
And
I know quite a few people in the OSR community. I'm friends with them. I think they're great people. But at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go play this game now.
Yeah. And speaking of
Honest-
which, we're 3 hours into this.
Yeah.
I've been
we
on
need to
this for
take off.
3 hours.
Yes. And
Alright.
I work nights, so I'm going to need sleep soon.
So,
Okay.
Taylor, thank you very much for coming. I'm really sorry about the scheduling goof.
No, it's all good.
I hope we can get you back on again, and
Oh, I'd
and
love
with-
to come
with
on again.
Grim and
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah.
It's the first
Yeah.
time I've really talked to you. I mean, we've
Yeah.
interacted a few times on Twitter, but
Yeah,
it's the first
yeah,
time I've
yeah.
really talked.
I have
I was
other guests.
excited when I saw you come in.
I have other guests who would probably enjoy talking to you too, Taylor. I'm not necessarily sure how nuts you would be about talking to them, but we can discuss it if
Sure.
if it
Let's
comes up.
discuss it on in Twitter DMs.
yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I really like your game design philosophy and your takes on stuff, and I do actually like reading your polls and things that you put up on Twitter because a lot of times it's very thought provoking. And
I just like polls. It gives me something to click on.
Yeah, I feel like that's what a lot of people.
I'm a
Cookie Monster.
I'm a simple man, Taylor.
It's good to admit that, you know. I think there's no shame. There's no actual shame in just being a simple person.
There you go. I like
All
butter
right.
in my ass and lollipops in my mouth. I'm just a simple man.
It's a Texas thing. You get used to it with him.
No, it's not. You've never heard that. That's from Boogie Nights. The actor who said that actually passed away recently.
Yeah, long as since I've seen Boogie Nights.
Yeah, I love that movie. I'm sorry, I just do because it's.
All right,
it's so
I've got to go.
bizarre.
Like,
All right, bye,
right away.
Cridge. All right, sorry,
All right,
bye,
have a good
Cridge.
day. It doesn't matter.
All right.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with us in this 3-hour-long session, and we'll see you next time.
Dungeons and Dragons Ride!